Faites l'appel, Mr. Greffier, s'il vous plaît.
Jemima Butler, Patrick Lalker, Evan Campbell, Owen Spillane, Finn Mason, Jennifer Cullen, Thomas Glover, Jennifer Lewis, Oscar Shermer, James Dunn, Ross Laurent, Sean Hughes, Sam Wright, Jacob Bergen, Morgan Brady, Max Johnson, Sam Gibbons, Philip Romerell, Jack Rive, Thomas Eva, Tango Billy Masters, Lysander Morby, Thomas Bowden, Scott Douglas, Matthew Morrell, Liam O'Connell, Christopher Stride, Stella Green, Holly Clark, Amy Hugh, Christy Lyons, Ryan Murphy, Alice O'Connell, Romy Smith, Heather Orpin, Lily Dobber, Jenna Stocks, Emma Pallant, Storm Rothwell, Clara Garrod, Rosie Nichols.
Greffier, who's doing the press? Mr. Coles?
Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite en la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous induis point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est la reine, la puissance et la gloire au siècle du siècle. Amen.
Well, the first item on the order paper is under A, communications by the President, and I'm very pleased indeed to welcome you all as members of the Youth Assembly today. It's a great pleasure to see you here, and I'm sure you'll have a great afternoon. I'm going to chair the first part of the session, and then Deputy Gruville will take over from me and chair the later part of the session. As communications from the President, perhaps I can add that you are not required to speak in English. French is an official language of the States, and you can, if you choose, speak in French. And if you really wish to, you could speak in Jersey French, because the Assembly agreed that recently, and that I'm sure will be one way of confusing ministers if you did that. I also thought I'd just take a moment to tell you something about the mace. I'm sure that all members of the Youth Assembly will be aware that the mace was given to the island in 1663 by King Charles II. It's to be carried in front of the bailiffs of this island in perpetuity, which is why it was carried in front of me by the chief usher today. And it was given because of the loyalty shown by the bailiff in the time of the Civil War. King Charles I, who had his head cut off, was supported by the then Bailiff of Jersey, and as a result of that support, Charles II gave the royal mace to the island when he was restored to the throne in 1660. And he also rewarded the de Carteret's with the grant of extensive lands in America, hence New Jersey. And for those who are not sure about it, Guernsey supported Cromwell and the parliamentarians, and that's why there's no new Guernsey. But we don't rub their noses in it. They don't have a mace either. Right, with those preliminaries out of the way, we come to question time, and the first question is Storm Rothwell of Jersey College for Girls, who has a question to ask of the Minister for Education. Ms. Rothwell.
Do you consider that the current PSHE curriculum is effective and covers a broad enough range?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Personal, social, health and economic education is an important and necessary part of all people's education. The breadth of the curriculum covers health and well-being, relationships, living in the wider world and citizenship. There are also additional elements of PSHE incorporated into the programmes for science, religious education and physical education which complement a wider picture. Where a whole school approach is taken towards the PSHE programme, then the curriculum has the potential to develop the qualities and attributes that young people need to thrive as individuals, family members and members of society. The statements within the curriculum document that students should be taught are deliberately open-ended where possible. For example, how to recognise and manage emotions within a range of relationships. The range of relationships is not specified. This allows teachers the flexibility to deliver PSHE based on the needs of their cohorts of students. In this way, they can equip them with a sound understanding of risk and the skills and knowledge to make safe and informed choices. The content of the PSHE curriculum relates only to the basic statutory elements, and teachers can expand on this in relation to the vision for the curriculum of the school, or in order to respond to equip pupils with additional skills that they may require. This has to be balanced with all the other elements of the curriculum. All states, non-fee-paying and fee-paying schools now have access to the PSHE Association. The association focuses on signposting teachers to high-quality, current resources which they can deploy to maximise the effectiveness of their teaching in this area. In summary, the PSHE curriculum has the capacity to be effective and meet student needs, especially through a whole school approach. The breadth of the curriculum is not limited to the statutory requirements and allows schools to widen their learning opportunities should they choose to do so.
Supplementary questions? Yes, Ms. Cullen. No? Are there any supplementary questions, Ms. Rothwell?
Do you not think that issues like religion, race, gender, ethnicity, living away from home and current affairs should also be required? How will you ensure these are addressed in the future?
So, yes, absolutely. I believe all of them should be involved in terms of PSHE. And like I've stated in the answer, the original answer to the questioner with regards to PSHE, it is within the realms of the school to be able to teach PSHE within the needs of the cohorts, the students within that school, to ensure that their needs are met and the requirements are met. I would suggest that an appropriate way to possibly do this would be through school council networks and discussions with the teachers in the way that that curriculum is then put through to the schools.
The supplementaries? Yes.
Would you consider making learning about topics such as the issues faced by the LGBT plus community part of the curriculum, as was done in Scotland last year, seeing as people part of the LGBT plus community experience high rates of bullying, mental health issues and suicide rates, and increased teaching could improve life by educating peers as well as them. This goes for issues such as racism and Islamophobia as well.
So I completely understand and actually agree with the questioner with regards to LGBT. It should be part and parcel of the PSHE curriculum. It's a sad day if I should have to legislate for that requirement, and would suggest that actually it's something that should be taken on board. It is a very real issue in today's society where people don't feel like they understand or can work or support each other in a community which I believe is extremely inclusive. And so PSHE would serve to help to support our younger generations to understand and work better as a community.
Any further supplementary questions? Further supplementary, Ms. Rothwell? No? Nothing? Well, we nearly missed your moment. Yes.
You said there that it should be part of the curriculum. What are you actually going to do to make it part of the curriculum?
So as I stated in the original answer, that actually the curriculum is specifically put in the way that it is to allow for the teachers to provide the PSHE that is necessary for the cohorts of students within their schools. I'd be happy to actually have it as a requirement under the curriculum, and I'd be happy to take it to the Curriculum Council and have that discussion. The Curriculum Council is a requirement under the Education Law, and therefore it's a discussion with a range of teachers from right across the schools, whereby we make decisions around what the curriculum looks like and and how we can provide that. I do go back to the original answer, though, that the curriculum is written specifically to allow for the teachers to have those lessons that are appropriate for the cohorts of students within their schools.
Thank you. Yes? Ms. Lilly.
So as human beings, we obviously will have our flaws and positives. However, how are you going to select the specific teachers who will ensure such a range of topics that we need to cover to be, as you said, thrive as individuals, family, and most importantly, members of the society?
So there's, with regards to the curriculum council, there is actually an election process through the teachers who decide who are actually have the time to be able to serve on that curriculum council. It was added as part, as an addition to part of their school day and part of their extra work that they need to do. But they add extreme value and they come from all different areas of our schools. So it will allow us, I mean, bearing in mind I also chair that curriculum council, and I am a states member, I am a politician, and I do take people's views into account, and you would hope that I would, being a states member. So I have a say sitting around that curriculum council as well, and that's why it's important for us to have that discussion, to be able to identify how it's appropriately taught in schools to ensure that that then leads into supporting family members in society.
Thank you very much. That brings that question to an end, and with apologies to Mr. Dunn, whose question I overlooked because I had an earlier version of the order paper, which is a very good lesson to us all, me included. Mr. Dunn has a question to ask of Senator Gorst, Minister for External Relations.
What consideration has been given to creating an independent Channel Island state?
Senator.
Thank you, sir. At present, no consideration is being given to altering our fundamental constitutional relationship with the United Kingdom or in creating an independent Channel Island state. Jersey's status as a crown dependency gives the island constitutional rights of self-government and judicial independence. Jersey has a considerable measure of autonomy within its constitutional relationship with the United Kingdom, although it is not independent of the United Kingdom. In practice, responsibility for the island's international representation rests largely with the United Kingdom government. However, the UK consults Jersey on its obligations in international law and other international agreements and does not legislate for the island without our consent. Jersey is also included in many of the important international conventions to which the UK is a party, including human rights legislation and international sanctions. So whilst not developing a Channel Island state, work is being undertaken to ensure greater cooperation between the bailiwicks of Jersey and Guernsey. In June 2018, the Channel Islands Political Oversight Board was established under the joint chairmanship of both islands' chief ministers. The board is designed to support ongoing cooperation between Jersey and Guernsey's public administrations, to find and support new partnership opportunities to improve our public services and reduce costs to taxpayers.
Supplementary? Supplementary questions? No. Ms. Dorber?
We weren't, we couldn't vote on Brexit. So what about in terms of Brexit? If the UK leaves, shouldn't we have a say, and perhaps a joint Channel Island state would become an option if we wish to say, just as a proposition?
It would, of course, have been constitutionally inappropriate for us to have a vote in the Brexit referendum. We are not part of the United Kingdom. We are, of course, loyal to the British Crown and have been so for many hundreds of years. We do not have representation in the United Kingdom Parliament. We decide our affairs rightly, in my view, in this place. So Brexit, of course, is meaning that we have to think about that constitutional relationship. It is meaning that we have to consider the effects of Protocol 3. It is meaning things that we have been allowed great flexibility in, i.e. the choice of which European directives we wish to implement and how we wish to implement them, are without doubt being challenged. We are prepared for every outcome next week, should it be next week. But of course, there are other reasons why thinking about Channel Island joint working is important. That is around economies of scale, it's around value for money for taxpayers, but actually it's also about internationally we are seen as the same, we are seen as the Channel Island, and we do already work incredibly closely and incredibly well on the international in regard to the international engagement that we undertake. So there are other reasons why we should be working towards that, which are not Brexit related.
No further supplementaries? Very well. Then we come to question 3, which Lily Dobber will ask of the Minister for Health and Community Services.
What plans, if any, do you have to change the rules governing blood donors in Jersey?
So I'm grateful to Ms Dobber for her question. Jersey generally follows the UK and European Union guidelines on blood donor selection criteria. The primary and overriding objective of our guidelines must always be to ensure that there is a blood supply that is both safe and sufficient for islanders. The guidelines evolve and change regularly. For example, there were 3 minor changes in 2018. Most of the minor changes arise as different infectious diseases become more or less prevalent in different parts of the world, and visitors to those areas are excluded from donation accordingly. The UK uses PCR-based technology that is suited to the size of its population to safeguard its blood supply, and uses and updates its acceptance and exclusion criteria in keeping with that technology. Jersey uses antigen antibody-based technology in keeping with the size of our population, and we use and update our acceptance and exclusion criteria in keeping with that technology. Both systems are equally safe, and the estimated residual risk from infection is at least as low with our system, and indeed often lower. We are introducing newer antigen antibody-based technology later on this year, and we will reassess our acceptance and exclusion criteria in the light of this new technology once it is embedded. This reassessment will include assessment of the safety of reducing the exclusion period for men who have sex with men, which changed in the UK in 2017.
Supplementary? Any supplementary questions? Yes, Stokes.
The Assembly has made plans for an opt-out organ donor policy in Jersey, following a similar scheme in Wales, which I think is great, but how do you plan to raise awareness for this, as that has been a large part of the success in other countries with similar schemes?
Thank you. So we are presently planning a campaign which will go live in the next few months before the anticipated date of 1st of July, when the new organ donation system will come into place. That is subject to state's decision, just agreeing that introduction date. But we are planning a publicity campaign which will involve, at the moment we're talking about a postal drop to all households, media and social media presence and making this known. And we just want to get out there and talk about it, encourage people to sign up to the organ donation register, whether they wish to be in a position to donate their organs or not, because the register will record a decision whether it is for organ donation or against. And the important thing in these circumstances is for people to talk with their families. So if that horrible scenario should ever occur, and families are being asked, would you agree to the donation of the organs of your loved one, they would know what the wishes are. And so it's so important to talk to people about these issues, but also all end-of-life issues. Thank you, sir.
Any other supplementary questions? Yes, Mr.
So I was wondering if, for example, I donate my blood here in Jersey, will this blood be kept here until an islander needs it, or is there certain schemes with the UK or France, for example, if someone needed my blood, would they be able to gain access to this?
My understanding, I'm not familiar with all the detail of how the department works, my understanding is that we generally keep the blood here, though there are arrangements with the UK and other jurisdictions, perhaps in cases of emergency, that we could provide them with blood supplies. We certainly have an arrangement with the UK that for certain specialist blood groups and other blood products which we might not have sufficient of here, we will bring them in from the UK.
No other supplementaries? No one going to ask the Minister which parts of the department he's unfamiliar with? Well, we come to the next question, which Owen Spillane will ask of the Chairman of Privileges and Procedures.
Should the electoral voting system in Jersey be reformed?
Yes, it should, sir. Urgently. Because depending on where you live in Jersey, your vote can have more weight or power than that of somebody else living in a different part of the island. The most extreme example is the Constable of St Mary, who represents under 2,000 people, and the Constable of St Helier, who represents over 30,000, 36,000 people. In this assembly, they both have one vote. That gives the voter in St Mary vastly increased influence and political power, if you like, than the voter in St Helier. We are in trouble with the deputies too. Take the parishes of St Peter, St Lawrence and Grouville, roughly 5,000 constituents each, within a 10 or 15% variance. St Peter and Grouville return one deputy each. St Lawrence returns 2 deputies. That's giving the people in St Lawrence twice the political influence and power as those in the other 2 parishes. At the last general election, some people were entitled to vote for as many as 13 candidates. Some people could only vote for 10 candidates. It's a human rights issue. Jersey is signed up to international treaties from the United Nations to the European Commission, designed to protect the right of every eligible voter to participate fairly and equally in the democratic process. If your vote counts for less than your neighbours, your human rights are diminished, and Jersey is in breach of its international obligations. Oh, sorry, there's even more. Forgive me. We need to redraw constituency boundaries to deliver equal-sized districts in terms of population, with each voter electing the same number of candidates. We need to simplify the system by reducing the number of categories of states member. At the moment we have 3: senators, deputies and constables. We need to put an end to people being elected without an election, without a contest. And we need to increase the number of people who turn out to vote. And now I really am finished.
Supplementary. Yes, Mr. First one round. Mr. Larko, yes, first, please. Mr. Larko.
If the electoral system in Jersey were to be reformed, would it be done under a system of proportional representation or first past the post as seen in the United Kingdom? And if so, in either case, would this involve the development of parties?
It's certainly something that we're considering, and it's something that has cropped up and the Assembly has looked at before. I think that at the moment we elect 8 senators, and that is that's compliant with international standards because it's the whole constituency is the whole island. So it's the same number of people voting for the same number of candidates. But it would be, I think, what we'd like to look at for the election of senators and perhaps deputies too, is that a single transferable vote in terms of, at the moment, you can just put 8 crosses on the ballot paper for senator. You don't have to put 8, but you can put up to 8. If you put 9, you spoil your paper. But I think it would make sense and be more interesting for both the voter and the politician and the candidate if you numbered your choices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or down to 6 or down to 5, however many you wanted. So we would be looking at that. As to whether that would inspire the creation of political parties, it's difficult to tell. It's difficult to tell. It's very hard. People have found it hard in recent history to form a political party, and which is why I commend our only political party, Reform Jersey, because it's a difficult job keeping people in order and keeping people voting, the same way. So they deserve commendation for doing that. And of course, the beauty of political parties, the beauty, if I may say so, of Reform Jersey, although I'm not a member, is that they have a manifesto across all their candidates. So you are voting more for policy, perhaps. You're voting more for policy than you are for personality. So that's the advantage of party politics.
Mr. Mason.
In your original answer to the original question, you talked about the things that we need to do, and it's all very well saying what we need to do, but how do you actually suggest that we implement these, and when will you actually be making these changes or proposing them? It's all very well saying what we need to do, and that's fine, but we can sit in here all day and talk about what we need to do. When will you actually do it?
Well, I will be bringing a proposition to the Assembly within a month or two with propositions for electoral reform. My propositions as chairman of the Privileges and Procedures Committee are prompted by and based on the recommendations of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Electoral Observers Mission, who've observed our elections for the very first time in Jersey's history. This Assembly passed a motion in January 2018 to invite the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Electoral Observers to come and look at our elections, as they do all around the world. And they came, they looked at the nominations, there were 10 of them from all around the world, and they looked at our elections, they produced a report, they've returned to the island to check on how we're getting on with implementing 18 recommendations. So they keep an eye on us. It's a very important step the island took at that time, because that, in black and white now, for us to see, is how we're failing as regards meeting international standards. But it's not there just for us to see. It's there for the whole world to see. So I think we're honour bound to have to work on that. What I have to do is persuade the people who are normally sitting in these seats every other Tuesday. And that is another question. What you can do, if you like the look of the recommendations, is lobby your deputy, constable or senator to vote for them and vote with me.
Ms. Connell?
Just going back to the current electoral system, are there any measures in place to increase the number of candidates running for election? Is the system democratic enough if there are deputies within the states not there on merit, but in fact there because unopposed?
Yes, 14 candidates at the last election were returned unopposed without a contest. The GREF, who you're familiar with because they organise this parliament and are in front of me here in the black robes, the GREF are very proactive at trying to make it easy and understandable for candidates to stand in elections. But I think it's a daunting prospect, especially with single-seat constituencies. I think if we were able to move to multiple-seat constituencies, we would likely attract more candidates. But that is tricky and controversial, and it has to gain the approval of the whole Assembly. And as I say, most propositions on electoral reform, in fact, probably 95% of all of them in the last 20 years, have failed in this Assembly.
I'm going to take two more questions, Ms Rothwell and then Mr Spillane.
Are there plans to encourage less represented demographics to stand for the States Assembly, especially considering the increasing demographic of native Polish and Portuguese speakers in the island and females, which are currently underrepresented in the States?
Yes, and work is being done on that. It's very, very important that a parliament, an assembly like this, looks like the population it's representing. So it's great that we've now got 14 women members of this assembly, and of course we need to get more. We also have, for the first time, our very first deputy who's of Portuguese heritage, and she's also a woman. So she ticks two boxes, and that's great. And she's actually helping me. Deputy Alves is helping me because some of you know she's an ex-maths teacher. I call her the human calculator. She's helping me with my subcommittee on electoral reform to try and see if we can get the maths right. We have to, it's called outreach, and we have to reach out to all sections of our community. We have to reach out to young people because they have a vote and we need them to use it and we need them to get involved. And it's a constant pressure and it's a constant challenge, but we are aware of it and we need to do more and continue that energy.
What consideration is being given to the 2013 referendum on states reform, where 41% chose option B as their first choice, which was to abolish senators and reduce the states down to 42 members from 49 members?
Some of the research for that referendum feeds into subsequent research on electoral reform, but effectively that is dead. It is an ex-referendum. It is no more. It is pushing up the daisies. And we've moved on. We've moved on. What we must strive never ever to do again is put a question to the public in the form of a referendum that the Assembly is not prepared to carry through and put into law. That was a really bad thing to do because it massively made people feel disenfranchised, made people feel that it wasn't worth them going out to vote. So it was a really dumb thing to do by the Assembly of the time to let something go to referendum that they themselves individually were not prepared to vote with or for if that is what the public chose. Brexit all over again.
Thank you. We come next to the question which Jemima Butler will ask of the Minister for Treasury and Resources. Ms Butler.
What consideration has been given to changing the current tax legislation?
Thank you, sir. Taxes are the price we pay to live in a civilised society. In Jersey, we believe that they should be set at the lowest amount that will deliver us a good public service. Taxes should be broadly based, simple to understand and fair. In Jersey, we calculate tax from multiple sources: income taxes from individuals and many companies, GST on the purchase of goods and services, AMPO duty on alcohol, cigarettes and fuel, stamp duties and rates. These taxes are amended every year in my annual budget and accompanying finance law. But some of Jersey's income tax legislation dates back to 1961, and in other areas it is even older. I'm currently carrying out a major review of Jersey's personal, not corporate, income tax regime, which is archaic. It still treats the income of married women as belonging to their husbands. That harks back to the days of Jane Austen, and it was not right then. It is not right now. I will be bringing ideas for reform to the States Assembly in a few months' time, and we will have new legislation to present by 2020. I have also very recently lodged a law that paves the way for an entirely new and modern online filing system for tax returns from 2020, with taxpayers being obliged to keep supporting records. I'm also reviewing the powers available to our tax officers to police the tax system. It is important that everyone pays their fair share of taxes, and Revenue Jersey must have the right powers to tackle the small minority of people who choose to evade their tax obligations. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary questions? Yes, Ms. Butler.
So if you're aiming to create a fair tax system, why are women taxed on sanitary products and which are deemed as essential items?
I think, as I mentioned, so my remarks, a fair tax system is across the board, and if we were start to tax individual items, as Ms. Butler mentioned, then it would be quite difficult, as the argument with GST was, as to what you take out of GST is, I think the old argument was, is a Jaffa cake a biscuit or a cake is something rabbit food, not comparing that to the items that you mentioned, but it's very difficult to remove certain items from a tax situation that's supposed to be broad, simple and fair.
Yes.
You said before that you want to try and keep the taxes low so that everyone has enough sort of like social stability, like enough everything what they need. The thing is that I feel like there are definitely areas where there needs to be improvement. I have a friend where, you know, bad things happen, family, sticky divorce. They had no money. They had to get housed in, like, they had to get money from the government to be housed. And they had to rely on a system where my friend, who was 16 years old, because she was 16, if she worked on the weekend and earned more than £100 a week, she would then have to, all of the money which was over £100, she would then have to pay for her house. And I don't think that it's right for a girl who is 16 years old and is still in full-time education to feel like she has to pay for her housing and accommodation. Surely there needs to be something where taxes need to be increased to stop this from happening.
That's a very good point raised, sir, and that's why we have the social security system that we do have, which is supposed to be a safety net to carry people who do, for no fault of their own, hit situations which are very emotionally and physically, on a lot of occasions, very difficult. And that's what the social security system does. But it does treat people as a household, not as individuals, until the young person is 19 years old. And so before that, they're treated as a household, so any money earned would be part of that household and therefore part of that tax system, whether that household pays tax or not.
Yes, Ms. Nichols.
So I support the changes being made regarding women's income tax. However, this was described in 2012 as archaic and unacceptable. So why has it taken a further 7 years for the law to even start to be amended?
Again, sir, may I say an outstanding question, and one which I asked the minute I assumed the role of Minister for Treasury and Resources. It has taken too long, but what we're doing is changing the tax system. So the whole computer system, the J.D. Edwards software system, is being changed, and I think I mentioned in my opening remarks, to allow for online filing. And with a tax system, it's so complex that one priority has to succeed another. So to change this archaic system, we have to have the online filing system and the revenue administration law in place first in order to allow that to happen, because it is very complex. And it will also depend on the results of the consultation, which we are just about to analyse the results of that consultation, as to whether people want, and I mentioned it in the answer to the question before, as to whether we have a household assessment of tax, be that married or unmarried people, but living as a household, or whether it's independent taxation under which this married woman's tax would be allowed to be demolished, be removed from the system. So it will happen either way, but it is a very complicated law and has to come into place with the rest of the administration law that goes behind it.
Yes, Mr. Glover.
In your original answer to the original question, you mentioned corporation tax. Now, with the recent issue of there being no money, in the, as mentioned in popular media, could corporation tax not be tweaked to meet this supposed deficit?
The short answer to that, no, sir, is no. It took quite a long time to bring corporation tax into the process, and it's a very competitive situation that we're in as far as an island dealing with other jurisdictions. And from the consultative period that we're undergoing at the moment, it's a personal tax review. It does not incorporate corporation tax, but no doubt that will come again. And I think the questioners talking about the fiscal policy panel review that was announced yesterday in their report, which says that we must increase our reserves and look to increase our revenue. So obviously we take on board what the FPP says to us, and we will be looking to do that, but not part of this personal tax review.
Yes, Ms. Stokes?
Considering the law in which husbands own their wives' income and same-sex couples must assign a husband has taken 7 years to even be amended, it feels as if the state values financial expediency over the rights of women and the LGBT community. Do you agree with this?
Thank the questioner. I, of course, agree. Otherwise, I would not be bringing this forward in as fast a pace as I can possibly do it in answer to a previous questioner. When a change in tax law is required, it does take time. It can't be done overnight. And as you all have appreciated from the media coverage of this, Deputy Doublé and Deputy Perchard have both been very behind the change in this law. And between us, we're pushing it forward. But when it's a change in law, just to go through Privy Council takes somewhere between 4 and 6 months, and we have to write that law in advance of that, which of course involves the law draftsman plus the taxes office putting forward the recommendations in the first place. So that in reverse order, and it just can't be done overnight.
Well, so until this happens, my wife keeps her income and I have to pay tax on it.
Wonderful, sir.
Very good. We come to the next question, which normally would have been asked by Philip Rommel of Victoria College, but as you'll be aware, the college students are not here this afternoon. Does anyone wish to ask that question of Deputy Tadier? And then we can have his answer in case there are supplementary questions. Have a volunteer? No? Yes, okay. Mr. Alka.
What proposals, if any, do you have to promote the use of Gérié throughout the island?
Assistant Minister.
Thanks. If I can start off, sir, by saying merci band FA to yourself for allowing this to be asked and answered. The States Assembly has recently agreed by an overwhelming majority to accept a proposition to produce all official public sector signage and letterheads both in English and Gérié, and when they need to be replaced. An amendment was also passed to adopt Gérié as an official language of this Assembly. This sends a strong message to islanders that Jersey politicians value our native language, and that we are also serious about supporting steps to promote and increase the profile of Gérié throughout the island. In the last 3 years, the government has appointed 4 experienced teachers to learn and teach Gérié. These teachers are currently delivering lessons in 13 primary schools and 6 secondary schools, and also teach a number of adult classes. We hope to expand the teaching service by recruiting more teachers as part of the next government plan over the next 4 years. Ideally, Gérié will be in the long-term curriculum, and this has happened in other places where minority languages also exist and are used and promoted. As a result of these measures, it is hoped that new generations of native Gérié speakers will emerge. The Gérié teaching service has also produced a Gérié language plan, which outlines aims and objectives to protect and promote Gérié, centred around 5 strategic themes. These themes build on the objectives to protect and promote Gérié. The aims of the state's Gérié plan will also seek to increase the acquisition, the use, the status of Gérié. In addition to this, we are also working with l'Office de Gérié with a view to securing ratification of Gérié under the terms of the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages. And lastly, the Government of Jersey will also continue to support the work of l'Office de Gérié and the Gérié Teaching Service in protecting and promoting our native language. So this unique aspect of our culture will continue to survive and thrive for many generations to come.
Thank you. Are there any supplementary questions on this? Mr. Dover?
Would you consider teaching, because you've said you would like to get it into the curriculum sort of long term, would you consider teaching it from reception in a way similar to how some schools, for instance, in Basque Country in Spain, they have different systems, but there are schools where 50% of the subjects are taught in Gérié, 50% in English, or Spanish there, but would you consider like sharing out what's taught just to be able to fully promote the language?
I think that's a very good point. I recently just came back last weekend, in fact, and Thursday, I was visiting some schools in the Isle of Man, and they have a very good example of a fully immersive language school there. So the whole curriculum is taught from a very young age. There's basically a reception class which goes up through to year 6, and they teach all of their subjects in Manx, but they also have a period of time where they will speak and teach English alongside it. And I think the two key things for that school is you teach it at a very young age when pupils, young people at that very young age are receptive to the new sounds, which have become increasingly difficult to pick up as you get older. And also it's teaching you other things, so whether it's maths or the science curriculum, you're learning that in that case it was the Manx language, but there's no reason that couldn't be applied to Gérié or to French or to any other language if you wanted to.
Yes, Mr. Mason.
I think it's very important that you promote the use of Gérié, not only for younger children teaching them, but for people of my age group. Because I'm 17 currently, and I can't think of many people my age group who'd see any use in Gérié and see the point of it. How do you plan to promote it and make it interesting for people of my age group?
So I think one of the things we need to recognise is that there was a generational phase that took place perhaps 40, 50 years ago where Gérié was actually discouraged and it became very uncool to speak Gérié to the point where it was beaten out of you at school, sometimes literally, unfortunately. I think we're at a point now where Gérié could be seen to be the new in thing, so it's an identity marker, and you see it in places like Wales, the Isle of Man, where it's used to distinguish yourselves from perhaps the previous generation. So the past generation are by and large non-Gérié speakers. They might have some legacy of the language. It was really the generation before that. And I think some of the steps we've seen with the music that's being produced in Gérié, but also the new younger teachers who are going out there teaching it from a young age. I think we need to make it more trendy, and I think that's one of the areas that's being employed in the new Gérié plan.
Mr. Spelling?
Would any consideration be given to adopting a system like Ireland, where Irish was almost phased out in the last century, and now it is compulsory to take to the equivalent of A-level? I'm not suggesting that it do be made compulsory until then, but would any consideration being made to make it compulsory to a certain age? And the Irish system also features 2-week periods of complete immersion in the Irish language. Now, obviously, that's harder to implement in Jersey because we don't have regions where there is just Gérié spoken, but would any consideration be given to promote this kind of activity?
So I think that's an interesting question, and it's one that applies more generally to languages. So if I can very briefly apply that idea, is that if we want to get to a point where we value languages generally in second and third languages, we need to make people want to acquire those languages and do it from a younger age if possible. So there are two schools of thought on compulsion. So the idea of making things obligatory. One is that you don't want students being forced to take a subject or certainly an exam which they're not interested in. But the other point is that if you don't make it compulsory, then it drops off from the curriculum, and that you don't necessarily get the early investment you would do because it's not considered a valued subject which you can then use on just to score in your league tables, etc. So I think the key thing is to promote it from an early age to get more people interested in Gérié or in other languages so that they continue to do it. And I think there is a question about which languages we make compulsory through to GCSE and A-level.
Well, that deals with that question. We now come to the question which Lysander Morby was going to ask of the Minister for Health. Would anyone like to read that question? Yes. Ms Lewis.
What action, if any, is the Minister taking to encourage a diverse range of people to train as nurses?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. The Education Department in my department, Health and Community Services, is keen to recruit a diverse range of people to train as nurses. And to this end, the pre-registration nursing team undertakes a variety of activities which are listed. First of all, they attend careers events organised by Skills Jersey. They attend individual schools when they're invited to do so. They visit nursery schools to speak to staff there who may be wishing to move into nursing. They offer vocational qualifications so that potential students can access awards that lead to a future career as a registered nurse. In practice, that really means that the healthcare assistants we employ are offered vocational qualifications which would lead them on to the degree programme for nursing. The team also guides students to Highlands College, where again the access course can be carried out, and that's an entry criteria to the nursing degree. It also offers guidance to potential students who are not from the island or the UK, but who might have nursing qualifications which need to be validated in Jersey. It also holds monthly open events for islanders to come and meet staff to discuss nursing and midwifery as a career. It offers all potential students personal advice and guidance whenever they wish at one-to-one meetings. And it works with students accessing the BTEC in Health and Social Care ward placements. And it guides students to Skills Jersey and student support for all additional information and information on upskilling for interviews, and also gives financial information. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, any supplementary questions? No? Okay, then we'll come on to the question which Ms Murphy is going to ask of the Minister for Infrastructure.
What efforts are being made to encourage people to use public transport?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. We have been working with Liberty Bus since January 2013, and we've been encouraging people to use the bus more by improving school bus travel. Bus laybys have been improved in recent years on Wellington Road outside Bowlia, helping to reduce congestion. Increasing the bus service capacity, both by increasing the frequency of buses and the coverage of the network, as well as by increasing the passenger capacity of the buses, e.g. using double-deckers. Improving the winter bus service. The level of service in winter is now very nearly the same as that of providing the peak summer season. Making it easier to pay. With the introduction of a Avanti card and contactless payment, less than 40% of bus journeys are now paid in cash, speeding up boarding and journey times. Better management of the fare structure. For example, an adult single journey still costs just £1.60 with an Avanti card, the same as the most expensive single fare was in 2010. Making buses more accessible. Avanti Pass pilot scheme was introduced in March 2017, providing free bus travel to those whose disabilities prevent them from driving. Also, buses have facilities for those with disabilities, e.g. wheelchair ramps. Enabling bikes on buses. The Liberty Bike initiative allows people to hire a Brompton folding cycle from Liberation Station and take it on the bus. Or customers can bring their own folding bike if it is checked for size first. Making it easy to get bus information, both at the bus station and electronically via Track My Bus app. Making buses more comfortable. extra legroom, more comfortable seats, modern interior, environment, and low engine emissions. Improving bus stops. More timetables provided at bus stops and over 90 waiting shelters, with approximately 50 of those installed since 2013. These improvements have been recognised nationally, and Liberty Bus has won numerous awards for transport, best practice, including the National Transport Award for the most improved bus service in October 2016, and the Chartered Institute of Transport and Logistics Award for Excellence in 2018. Thanks, sir.
Supplementary questions? Yes, Bertie.
I noticed that you failed to sufficiently mention any efforts taken to improve the bus service timetable, some of which routes, including outbound to Gorey, finish as early as 7:30 p.m. Therefore, what do you suggest could be done to improve the availability of such bus routes in the future?
I think I mentioned, sir, that the winter service is now more or less the same as the summer service, which is a great improvement. We do try working with Liberty Bus on an experimental basis to reach outlying areas of the island, but again, this is based on supply and demand. We've tried several services on the northern routes and on the eastern routes, but that's something I will take up with Liberty Bus for people who wish to have an evening in town and return later. But as they are returning to the principal points, as in sort of Gorey, but maybe not further afield. Thank you.
It's you.
What are your thoughts on school buses being made free, as many students are being forced to take them to and from school every day?
This is something that has been discussed at length with Liberty Bus, and basically at the moment the school bus fares are heavily subsidised. I believe it's about 80 to 85p, but it wouldn't actually improve the situation. This has been, as I say, discussed at length with Liberty Bus, but we are trying to keep it as low as possible and put on extra services when available.
Yes, Mr. Glover.
In concern for transportation and therefore of traffic congestion, would you ever consider putting a cap on the number of owned vehicles, and if not, why?
Minister.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure we heard correct. On private individual vehicles. But that's sort of slightly outside of my remit. It's basically it's a human right to own a vehicle if someone chooses to do so. We are encouraging more and more people to use the public bus service. Walking, we've just completed 2 final links of the cycle track down at French Harbour and English Harbour. It's now possible to cycle from Corbière all the way to Havre de Pau without encountering any large vehicles on the track there. As the Deputy of Grouville is well aware, we're trying to extend the eastern cycle track, but it is problematic because getting land ownership rights and passage through is difficult, but it's something we are definitely working on. We had the advantage in the old days that the western railway track was more or less intact, apart from the tracks taking up, but the eastern railway was in fact sold off for housing. So we have to make new inroads there. But it is something we're well aware of and working on, sir.
Ms. Luce?
Would you consider making sure that the bus routes go on until 3 a.m. on weekends? As a lot of people struggle to get back home, and they also find themselves in difficult situations and having to get lifts, and I think it's also quite dangerous.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. 3 a.m. would, I think there's a capacity problem, so that there wouldn't be the demand there for buses at 3 a.m. But I would also agree with the question, sir, that there are Jersey lifts, which I would say are extremely dangerous, and would advise people definitely do not use them because they are uninsured, the drivers are not screened, and heaven forbid, should there be a tragic accident, insurance would not be covered, sir.
Ms. Rothwell, and we'll go on to the next question.
Given low-income families are more likely to have to take the bus considering the high cost of petrol and cars, would you consider further subsidising bus fares for low-income families?
Subsidies, that would be something for our colleagues in social security to assist with. But I say we're keeping for £1.60, we're keeping the fares as low as possible with the Avantry card, which speeds up admission to the bus and processing passengers very, very quickly. We are very keen to keep the fares as low as possible, but obviously we cannot run the bus service at a loss, sir.
We now come to the next question, which Amy Hugh will ask of the Minister for Children and Housing.
What are your thoughts on there being a rental cap in Jersey?
Thank you, sir. The last income distribution survey showed that it's the cost of housing that is the single biggest contributing factor for causing relative poverty in Jersey. This is a market which is broken and is not working in the best interests of ordinary islanders. We know, for example, that private rented sector rents were 9% higher in 2018 than they were in 2017. And 56% of people who rent privately pay more than 30% of their income on rents. This clearly has a significant impact on the quality of life enjoyed by islanders, so I'm taking action to improve the affordability of housing in Jersey. Introducing a cap on rents is one option, but it has shown limited success when used in isolation in other jurisdictions. There are many other options to improve the affordability and indeed the quality of housing that have to be considered too. And they include improving the supply of housing, with more than 1,000 affordable homes being built between now and 2020. That will reduce the upward pressure on rents. Considering rent stabilisation measures that require landlords to provide longer leases with no above-inflation rent increases permitted. Improving the transparency of the fees and charges tenants are required to pay when letting a property. Preventing landlords from discriminating against tenants with children, introducing legal minimum standards for rented properties so that no tenant is having to pay to rent to live in a substandard property, bringing long-term vacant properties back into use, assisting people to buy their own home, and looking at ways of restricting foreign ownership of buy-to-let properties as these increase demand for a restricted supply of homes. These are just some of the measures that need to be considered by the new Housing Policy Development Board that I will lead during this term of government to help secure good quality and stable homes that are affordable for people in Jersey.
Are there any supplementaries?
So it's my understanding that currently first-time buyers are able to make major home improvements to their properties after buying them and selling them for higher prices, leading to a lack of affordable housing for new first-time buyers. What is being done, therefore, to prevent this?
So it's a good point, and there has in the past been investment in supporting first-time buyers, particularly younger people, to buy properties. Many of those options are no longer available. So I would like the Housing Policy Development Board, which I chair, to look at this issue to see what we can do to support properties remaining as first-time buyer properties for the future, and looking at what we can do to increase support for those people who want to buy their properties.
No more questions to the Minister? Okay, we'll move on to the next question by Ross Laurent.
Has any consideration been given to altering the timings of the school day across the island?
Schools have considered this individually and over the last few years. Indeed, some schools have altered the school day in recent years and changed their internal days arrangements. The hours of the school day are decided by the individual schools, taking into account the needs of the curriculum, the historical precedents established in a school, parental preferences and needs, the requirements of the government for sufficient education time, but no demands for specific hours, start, finish times, the exam programs, which require certain minimum hours to complete courses, and even the scheduling of buses. I am aware of research on the teenage brain that suggests a later start in the day for older students. I understand that this is to be trialled in a few schools in the UK. To change the times at the end and start of the day, there needs to be consultation with different stakeholders and notice given to parents. Any changes would commence at the start of an academic year, i.e. September.
Are there any supplementaries?
So you say schools have considered this individually, highlighting that it's actually being left to them. Has this topic actually been seriously thought about, or will it just be left unheard of?
I've been Education Minister for 9 months, and in this term I plan to look at a whole raft of issues with regards to education. One in particular being the education law, the curriculum, the actual funding of our schools. They are huge pieces of work that need to be carried out, but I'm hoping to create a foundation in education that lasts for the next 20 years. And all views and all concerns will be taken into account. Of course, the education law I'm hoping to bring in 2021, but the work surrounding behind that will fill into the education law. And of course, understanding there are research, there's science studies, all those types of things with regards to actually how the day of a student at school may be affected depending on the times. It is a consideration that needs to be taken into account. At the moment, of course, I want to focus on trying to get the education law sorted out, the curriculum in place properly, and actually school funding so that we can support all our younger generations going forward.
Any more supplementaries? Very well. We'll move on to questions without notice, and this will be about 15 minutes to the Chief Minister. So I hope you've all got your questions ready. Fingers on the button, ready for the off. Who would like to ask the first question? Jenna Stocks.
In the UK, a woman does not need parental consent to have an abortion if she is under the age of 16. However, in Jersey, there is nothing written in the law about this, and so doctors can ask for parental consent. Would you consider an amendment to this law so that it is the same as the UK in the interests of patient confidentiality?
Well, so much for a nice, easy ride into the questions. It's a very serious subject. I'm not going to give you a direct answer straight away because, bluntly, it'd be on the advice of the Health Minister to my left, and in terms of what are the ethical and reviews within the island that would require consultation, I'm pretty clear. I do understand the point you're making, but I think actually it would be through the Health Minister and through a very careful period of making those changes. But I'd be very happy to direct the Health Minister to look into it. Thank you.
Oscar Shermer.
Yeah. So I can't help but think that a lot of the issues that have been discussed today are really quite small in comparison to the environmental crisis that we're currently facing as a planet. Animal agriculture, a lot of research has suggested that it is the world's leading cause of habitat degradation, water scarcity, and greenhouse gas emission. Is this something that it would be viable to challenge on the island in terms of the cow industry? If not, why? And what else is being planned to be done or being done to challenge the environmental crisis?
Sorry, can I just clarify? That was cow industry, not car industry? Sorry, well, I'm not going to get into too much about merits of the Jersey cow over other cows on the planet, although I've always been given to understand that, oddly enough, as a smaller cow, it produces less methane, and therefore, in terms of cows, it's actually more environmentally friendly than others. But in terms of environmental challenges, we know that as a small island, the impact on the global scenario is obviously going to be small. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing things. And that is actually why, and although we talk about process as politicians a lot, we were required to produce a plan as a government, legally required, had to be put in by a certain date, and one of our top 5 priorities is environment. And that, I believe, is the first time it's been a top priority from any plan from any previous council ministers. So hopefully that shows we are committed to doing that sort of thing, and therefore looking at, and when I say our emissions, I'm more looking at the vehicle side and reducing those sort of things. I think that's something that we will be looking at as a government going forward.
Finn Mason.
Do you think it's okay to be rebranding the government and spending millions of pounds with UK consultancies, excluding local firms from the Charlie Parker project, while cutting funding to public organisations such as the Jersey Arts Centre, as well as pay awards to frontline services?
To answer that in 30 to 90 seconds is going to be interesting. Let's start at the beginning. In terms of the rebranding is, as we've tried to explain technically, the issue or the divide between the government of Jersey and the states of Jersey started in 2005 when ministerial government came in. Previously we had a committee system. That meant the government actually was part of this assembly. That split in 2005 to ministerial government meant that there was a division, and therefore the government of Jersey was actually separate to the states. The states is the parliament now. So what we've done is essentially, and the actual branding started in 2014, being used off island because actually it gave clarity to when you're dealing with other governments. So all we've done is actually said, look, the confusion, and there was a confusion around, we've bitten the bullet and adopted it wholesale. We have also ensured that there's a Gerio branding according to that. It did not cost millions of pounds in that instance because it basically is all done internally, and I can't remember the exact figures, but it was several thousand. In terms of the wider transformation project, which is crucial, one of the things that I stood on that many of us, and actually many of us have encountered over a long period of time, is that the systems we had in place have not been working well. We can turn around, we can look at mental health services and say they are bluntly poor. And therefore that means that what we were doing previously has not been good enough for all sorts of reasons. There'll be one as a technical argument, may or may not appeal to people. There's a thing called GDPR, which is about the new legislation under data protection. So in most companies on island and nationally and internationally, they've been preparing it for 2 years. If you get it wrong and you're not ready for it, you get fined by up to 10% of turnover. States of Jersey turnover is between 750 and 800 million pounds. Therefore, a fine would be in the order of 75 to 80 million pounds. 6 months before GDPR had to be implemented by Jersey law, we were not even remotely ready for it. Exactly, and I can see from the expression of the questioner's face, that was not acceptable. And therefore, we had to bring in experts very rapidly to get it in place. You do not get experts on that at the drop of a hat. And if they're going to come in at short notice, they're going to be expensive. Those are the type of things that we have been dealing with. And those are the type of things that is why we are going through a transformation process at the moment. It's been long needed. It's not just the previous council minister, the one before that's had it. This has been sitting there for decades in certain times. And so what we're dealing with at this whole time is anything from pay and conditions, some of which are archaic, some of which are discriminatory, to dealing with processes which have not been acceptable, to actually then sorting out, and this is where some of the priorities are coming forward, of things like mental health going forward. So the transformation program, the old adage is, if you want to keep doing things the same, if you keep doing things the same way, you'll end up the same result. That is why you need different people at the top to bring in their external expertise to get things done.
Chief Minister, before we move on to the next question, could I ask your questions to be more concise, please? Because otherwise we'll only get round to about 4 questions. Next person I saw was Jen Stocks. No? No? Okay, sorry. Jennifer Cullen.
For the states to reduce damage to the environment through cars and motor vehicles, as you previously stated, are the new 20 mile per hour speed limits through the ring roads in town necessary? Did you consider the additional traffic jams and congestion that this would have, and then the contribution to climate change and the environment?
At a level of detail, I have to say I'm not too sure the results in terms of emissions. I've always understood 2 things. One is that if the car was going slower, I think it does depend. Does it produce less emissions or not? I will just say, in reality, in town, how easy was it to do more than 20 miles an hour at any given time? But the other point is, it is actually about safety of pedestrians, and that's the overriding priority in that instance. In terms of going forward, I think as a generation, you will see, probably more than me, well, actually, hopefully we'll all see in the next 10 years, things like more electric cars coming through and more, obviously, driverless potentially, and hopefully at some point even wider, perhaps electric buses and stuff like that. Now that will do a lot of things for emissions.
Emma Pallant.
In an age where we are threatened by climate change, why has an effective recycling collection system not been established for schools and offices? For example, at my school, we have green recycling bins that just get put with all the other rubbish, and it seems like they're just there for show because there isn't a recycling collection system, which a lot of schools in the UK have.
I'm surprised, and I'd certainly be happy to ask the Minister for Infrastructure and the Minister for Education just to liaise. I'm surprised that the schools would be going through a collection process just for it to be disposed and burnt. So I'd hope that would be happening. Obviously, one of the things that we do have at the moment is curbside recycling from a number of the parishes, and I know it's the ambition to try and get it out to all the parishes. And the point is, if recycling is easy, more people buy into it, and that's important.
Okay, Romy Smith.
What efforts are being made to support those students whose first language isn't English in our schools? Would you ever consider a school that caters for multinational students?
Again, as a detailed point, I think that's very much one for the Minister for Education. My understanding is that where you do have pupils whose first language is not English, that there is specific provision in certain schools for them. Can that be better? I think you're probably in a better position than me to judge, and again, I'll have a discussion with the Minister for Education.
I've seen Finn Mason, but you've already asked the question. So I'll move to Thomas Glover, and we may come back to you after Finn.
Chief Minister, how can Charlie Parker's contract, which grants important powers to an unelected person, be justified in a supposedly democratic state?
Just to clarify, the Chief Executive's contract does not grant him powers. That would be his contract of employment. What the member may be referring to is changes that were approved by the previous Assembly and others that may be coming to this Assembly, which are changes to the law. There's always been a recommendation that there was, in the past, ministers did not work together properly, and equally the departments did not work together properly. It was, I think they called them dual fracture lines. And one of the recommendations that came through, which was what was approved by the previous Assembly, was to sort that out so that effectively you did have a Chief Executive who could tell civil servants what to do, which actually, bear in mind the other problems that are coming through, is probably the right move. What is important is that we do have the right checks and balances in place, and there are some discussions around the improvements in structures that do need to happen.
Jennifer Louise.
Referring to my colleague Mr. Campbell's point, which I think was not answered properly, as a financially privileged community, I think we have an obligation to make environmental changes and set an example for other communities. You've said that the environment is now a top priority, but what specifically is going to be done? It should be a number one priority.
In terms of what is happening, I would actually refer the member to, for example, the headlines in the press, I can't remember if it's today or yesterday, which was around water pollution. And there is a very concerted effort being done now to start addressing it, which hasn't really been tackled in the past. And I know, having particularly been involved in things like the PFAS pollution that has affected residents in St. Peter's and St. Bernard's from the airport. So there are actions being taken to try and address that, which has been a long-standing issue that has not been addressed. As I made reference previously, I think we will start seeing measures in place to reduce emissions and to try and encourage electric vehicles. And obviously there's the wider thing of trying to encourage people to cycle, walk, and not use vehicles, or not use private vehicles, and we'll see more of that coming through.
Ma'am, whilst the Chief Minister is receiving his grilling, I wonder if I could ask for a suspension of the normal standing orders preventing us from taking photographs so that I can tweet an Instagram shot of the Youth Parliament from this angle.
Okay, I was just checking because I thought it was up to the bailiff to give permission, but apparently it's up to me, so fire away.
Thank you, ma'am.
Storm Rothwell.
Given Mr. Parker's recent assertion that there is a funding shortfall of £14.9 million and therefore no more money for payoffers, do you think it's reasonable to suggest a £3 million project to merge Liberation Square and the Weybridge?
I'm not too sure about the 14.9 million. At the moment, we're facing a deficit in 2020 of 30 million, and that will increase up to 40 million over the next 4 years. And that is why the transformation program that we're talking about is so critical, and that is also why, as I said, we are having the various discussions around the pay dispute that's been also referred to. In terms of the Liberation Square project, again, that was a decision made by the previous council ministers at the time. And I do emphasise the difference between one-off capital spending and incurring revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure keeps repeating itself. It comes down to, and there will be a decision, this has gone out to public consultation, essentially, and we'll see what the feedback is like. Next year is the 75th anniversary of liberation. That should be something that's special for this island. Equally, so as a concept, I don't have a problem with, or actually I'm supportive of, the Liberation Square project. When I say as a concept, we need to understand the traffic implications. As a concept, that could produce quite a large usable public space. That means it's investing into St Helier. It would actually be the first physical, tangible dividend out of SOJDC, that's the finance centre, i.e. that would be the source of the funding. And actually, if you think of things like the marathon, or think about the food fairs, or actually Liberation Day itself, it gives you a much better permanent space that we could use. It's the equivalent for town of us buying Plemont a few years ago, which I was supportive of. Now, we do have to understand the traffic implications, and I have to keep this concise answer.
Yes.
I hope it gives you the context we're operating in. But the deficit we have, which is an ongoing revenue expenditure issue, will not be affected by a one-off capital spend.
Okay, and I'll allow two more questions. So can we have Miss Stella Green?
Why is it that health visits stop at the end of primary school and not extend to the age of 18?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Why is it that health visits stop in primary school and don't extend to the age of 18?
I actually wasn't aware, because I thought they certainly, a long time ago, in my day as secretary, I think the health visitors did continue into secondary. I genuinely do not know. I shall find out from the health minister right next to me, and we'll relay that question back to you.
And the final supplementary to Clara Garwood. Thank you.
Would you consider introducing frequent visits to care homes in the primary school curriculum, considering the prevalence of a generational gap in Jersey and the major benefits for both the elderly people and the primary school children?
That's a very interesting question, a good one to end on. And actually, yes, because I know I've seen certain projects, I think, in the US and in the UK, where there have been benefits on both sides. Say the older people really enjoy having the younger company, and as you say, it bridges that generational gap. So yes, that would be something we should be supporting.
Thank you, Chief Minister. So on behalf of the Youth Assembly, I'd like to thank the Chief Minister and the ministers who joined us this afternoon, and the chair of PPC. They all have very busy diaries, and I'm sure we would all appreciate showing our appreciation in the usual way to them. They're very welcome to stay, and I'm sure they'll learn a lot from the public business that we're about to start now.
Mum, can I just say on behalf of the ministers, thank you to all the attendees of the Youth Assembly. I have to say on my first time, particularly as there was a certain element of glee as to how the Chief Minister was going to be grilled, I have enjoyed the process, and actually there have been some very good questions, particularly ranking with the ones that will get thrown at me next week, I suspect, as well. But thank you all very much, and well done. Enjoy the rest of your day. I do have to go in about 10 minutes, but I'll say until then.
Okay, thank you. We now move on to public business, and the first item is a proposition from Patrick Lalka of Holier School, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The Assembly has asked whether it's of opinion that Jersey should introduce a new immigration policy based on the Australian point system.
Mr. Lalka.
So my team and I, hopefully, are here today to discuss the current issue of overpopulation here in Jersey. This issue is usually disregarded and is an example of we'll cross that bridge when we get there initiative. However, this is an ongoing long-term issue
and when we get there, it will certainly be too late. Nevertheless, we aren't suggesting stopping everyone from coming to the island. Certainly myself, as an immigrant, I cannot be more thankful for the opportunity to come here and basically start a new life. What we are saying is to be more elective with who we allow onto our island. This is where we look towards Australia as an example of how our system could be changed. Their system, in summary, is based around a point system in which people gain points according to their occupation. There is also adjustment to the country's requirements. Here are simple economic laws of if there is a demand for a job in Australia, the supply will be adjusted to meet that need. Therefore, Australia is very adjustable in their immigration system. This could be easily implemented into Jersey with the Jersey's small size, and there is no reason why it couldn't work. The only way to enter Jersey is through airport or boat, and it allows for easy monitoring of the island, and it allows people to come in who we require according to the system. The Australian system for immigration is closely monitored yearly. The government sets an annual immigration intake as part of the budget. Since 1998, the annual migration has been mostly skilled workers rather than families coming into the country. Australia have a population of 24.6 million as of 2017. They saw a net migration of plus 245,000 people, which is just 1% of their population. To reiterate the importance of immigrants, Australia filed a report in 2018 looking at immigration and the positive impacts it brings. It's common knowledge that migration brings positive economic, social, and cultural impact in Australia. Generally speaking, migrants and refugees show strong resilience and adaptability to new challenges and surroundings. They are willing to take menial jobs when first settling in. Also, many migrants and refugees suspicion for hard work and are willing to take sacrifices in order to establish themselves in a new society. And this could not be more true for Jersey, with the large population of Polish, Portuguese, and other immigrants and refugees that have established themselves in Jersey society. As a result, these people take low-income jobs to settle into the island, which fills the demand for these kinds of jobs. However, Jersey's system in managing immigration system is nowhere near effective or sustainable for the population. The current system requires migrants to stay on the island for over 10 years before they can buy their own home and establish themselves as proper Jersey citizens with their own piece of land on the island. Although this does decrease the incentive for people to come here, they are still seeking for a new life. And if they left the home country, which they are struggling in, they will still stay here and try and make use of what they have. As a result, the housing crisis combined with the high income tax, which individuals have to pay, has a negative impact on the standards of living. This is due to the low quantity of disposable income available to people in everyday life. Increasing the supply of houses can be a part of the solution. However, much of Jersey's private sector is unregulated with no safeguards in place on whether those properties are suitable or being rented for a reasonable amount. This means immigrants are mistreated by landlords on the island just because they weren't born here. This should be resolved in the island, implementing the idea only to allow people who are selectively chosen through the system. Overall, we know humans aren't regarded as working machines, those who are useful and not useful. However, there comes a time which require consideration, and the view of the size of the island should be seen as a limiting factor. The population grew in Jersey to provide the base of a strong economy. However, now, to allow our island to evolve, we need to acquire quality over quantity. Thank you.
Is the proposition seconded?
Proposition is seconded.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Don't be shy. Rosie Nichols.
Would you say that a point-based system is ethical? Because it may not be the fault of an individual if they have low-value skills due to the place they've grown up. They may have had a lack of education, a lack to build up on those skills, and therefore do you think it's fair to penalise them for not having access to the same skills as someone living in a more developed country might have? And would this apply to refugees as well?
Does any other member wish to speak? It's a very good debate, and I'm sure you've all got an opinion on it. Jenna.
This is a different point to my colleague, but currently in Jersey, the dependency ratio, the ratio of people working and paying into the system against those not working and thus not paying into the system, is 50-50. For every one person that works, there is one person that doesn't. However, statistics from Jerseyan Statistics predict that as immigration decreases, the dependency ratio increases, meaning there are more people not working to every person working, which could result in not enough money coming into the system to support the population. What action do you propose to prevent this from happening as you aim to decrease immigration?
Does any other member wish to speak? Ms. Storm Rothwell.
Yeah, again, I've got a different point. The point system would actually not be as effective in Jersey because a lot of the immigrants we take in are for agricultural work, which we ourselves would not be willing to do. And the immigrants that we take in for this actually don't require minimum English language speaking skills or qualifications or work experience, which the Australian point system requires.
Any other member wish to speak? Mr. James Dunn.
Maybe I'm misconcepting what's been said, but isn't it based on a supply and demand system? If there's demand for these farm-based agricultural workers, then surely the system will be adjusted for the supply to be available for them.
Anyone else wish to speak? Very well. I'll call upon Mr. Patrick Lelka to reply.
As said before, I think the rental cap that was talked about will definitely be helped through this immigration system, as there'll be basically less demand for the houses, which will mean the supply would be able to finally keep up. And we obviously want to be different from Brexit and actually make this happen. And I don't think that, and I think the system would also help the idea of the unequal assembly, as taking more experienced people with, you could say, more quality will bring much better views into the society, as just because someone is Polish or Portuguese or a woman, they shouldn't be automatically elected into the assembly just because they have that origins. They need to be experienced and have the ability to show people's views across. I think the proposed system will decrease the immigration, as well as decrease the pressure on the public transport that's been talked about before. And Liberty Bus, basically being a monopoly here in Jersey, is forced to supply people with the service that they need to get to work and home every day. And as mentioned, Jersey lifts can be a very dangerous service, so therefore relying on public services will allow people to feel more safer, hopefully, in their lives. Also mentioned by my colleague Evan, the climate emissions. As we bring less people into the island, there will be less demand for food and, for example, Jersey milk, and will allow for these emissions to slowly decrease. And I would like to, when we establish this, we could then focus on being a sustainable island. For example, we have one of the best tidals in Jersey, which will allow for things such as wave power to be finally implemented into this island, which would help the environment. And when we set this balance of basically not allowing more people into the island, it will even force people from Jersey to seek these low-income jobs, as they'll need to see it as something that will help the economy and hopefully develop us people and not see immigrants as only someone to fill those low-income jobs. And your ethical points, I think, are valid. However, there has to be a point where we look some further, as there is no planet B. So if we keep growing and not do anything about it to be more sustainable, it would just be an ongoing problem that's usually avoided. And people come here because our main reason is income, as it pays more than the home country. So I think it needs to be an issue of countries, for example, as Poland or Portugal, where low-income people basically need to earn more and it's something that I think as a whole world we need to help to make people feel comfortable in their own society. Thank you.
Is the appel called for?
And I call for the appel.
Thank you. Very well, the appel has been called for. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have cast their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. And I can announce that the proposition has been won. 16 votes for, 9 votes against, and 4 abstentions. So we move on to the next item on the agenda, and that's a proposition from Mr. James Dunn of De La Salle, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The Assembly has asked whether it's of opinion that changes should be made to the secondary school system in Jersey.
Mr. Dunn.
Our school system is failing. Teachers are striking. Students are at the breaking point, and the people want change. Not enough legislation has been passed. Not enough action has been taken, and it's up to the states to fix this issue and bring real change to Jersey. There are a few key areas of reform to fix large-scale dissatisfaction. Firstly, what is being taught in schools is simply not applicable to everyday life post-school. Topics like the structure of a cell, distillation of crude oils, and electromagnetism are things that we will learn about throughout our GCSEs that will have no bearings or implications within our lives. You probably haven't even thought about these topics since your exams. Instead, what should be taught are useful skills that will be utilised pretty much every single day, like managing finances and dealing with stress in the workplace. Secondly, the role that teachers play in education is vital and undervalued. This is clearly evident by the strikes that are taking place as we speak. Our teachers need more funding and support to help raise the generations that will carry Jersey into the future. Thirdly, the school day itself is in question. It simply starts too early. Throughout the UK, schools have recently been given the ability to set their own school timings, and there is no reason that Jersey could not follow suit. Finally, our school system is too open to the dangers of e-safety, and more specifically, issues like Islamic radicalization, and other such issues. In conclusion, more needs to be done in the states to fix the issues that are affecting our youth, so that future generations can take Jersey into the future.
Thank you. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes. I'd like to second you need to start by asking the right questions. What are the objectives of school? How do we best deliver these objectives? How do we measure success and failure? Where do we look for guidance? And how much are we prepared to pay? These are the key questions for us in Jersey. I think schools should aim to deliver a broad and solid education that prepares us for adult life, higher education, training and work, but at the same time, schools should do no harm. Students today are under more pressure than ever before. Stress levels are high and depression and anxiety level diagnoses are rising. Admittedly, some stress is good for us and it definitely helps us in motivating, but today's levels are counterproductive. So what might help? Sleep. It's as important as diet and exercise, and according to the National Sleep Foundation...
Mr. Dunn, I hesitate to interrupt you, but your fan noise has been picked up by the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So sleep. It's as important as diet and exercise, and according to the National Sleep Foundation, the sleep requirement for teenagers is between 8 to 10 hours per night, which indicates that the earliest healthy wake-up time for teens should be not before 7 a.m. So what about a small shift in school hours to reflect this? Minnesota, USA, was one of the first places to trial this in 1996, and instantly car crash rates declined in this area by 70%. These were student car crash rates. Major national health organizations put statements forward supporting later starts for high schools, and this could be easily trialed in Jersey using a small pilot scheme initially. The quality of teachers. From as far back as the Coleman Report, more than 50 years ago, to today's research, teacher quality is one of the few school characteristics that significantly affects school performance, student performance. Interestingly, one of the specifics that makes a good teacher is their scores on the verbal skills test. Teachers' verbal skills test result appears to be predictive of student achievement. And modern data can even see the impact of individual teachers over time and measure their success compared with average. Teachers who are successful with students in 1 year tend to go on to be successful in future years. There is a huge difference between an effective teacher and an average teacher in exam success. And data shows that teachers appear only to improve in quality up to 5 years of teaching, no matter what is spent on personal development. So, to get the best teachers delivering the best outcomes for students, you have to pay more. Teachers in educationally successful Canada and Finland are significantly better paid, they are treated better, work fewer hours, and they are highly regarded. Entry into the teaching profession is extremely selective. So, measuring success and failure. Finding out what works well and needs more collaboration between politicians and teachers. It should be easy in Jersey to arrange meetings with representative teachers from each school and/or a student rep who can collate information from many other students, and quality data can be both analysed by both educators and by policymakers with student presence to ensure that common sense prevails and that changes are at least evidence-based. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laurel. Does anybody else wish to speak? Right, I have Miss Clara Garwood.
So I do agree that, in this day and age, students suffer from a huge increase in mental health problems, anxiety, depression rates are significantly higher than they've ever been before among younger people. But I disagree with Mr. Dunn's proposition in his speech, saying that, why do we need to learn about, I can't remember what your specific examples were, the organelles within the cell, I think you mentioned. And it's not about exactly what you learn, it's about the environment that you learn in, and it's about encouraging this passion for education and understanding the importance of education and learning and increasing educational attainment, which can last a lifetime if done well in education from the beginning. I also would like to point out that the studies you mentioned in the USA, school start times there start as early as 7 a.m. on average. So here, when we start around 8:30, there's like a big difference there, and so that is perhaps one of the reasons why we see these results in the US. And I do agree with increasing teacher salaries. Teachers obviously make education, and the OECD does an annual Education at a Glance report for each country, and I've looked at this. And the OECD average for salaries is, I can't remember the exact figure, but in the UK it's significantly lower, which is a really large problem we have, which doesn't encourage enough teachers to enter the profession. We also have a really young education kind of department. Teachers, on average, are 5 years younger than the rest of the OECD countries studied, so some points to read.
Right, next on the list, there's quite a few of you that want to speak, which is really good, is Miss Jenna Stocks.
In addition to my colleague's point earlier made, understanding things like hydrocarbons or crude oil are essential in understanding how to make these means of energy production more eco-friendly to save our environment, which we have already mentioned as failing. So your statement that these things we are learning at school are useless is incorrect.
Okay, sorry. Miss Jennifer Cullen.
Just addressing your issue of sleep or lack thereof, surely going to sleep earlier would solve the issue of not getting enough sleep. And I was just thinking, but will starting the day later, would that not demotivate students? I may be in the minority, but I feel when I wake up early, I feel as though I have the day to be productive, and I feel as though I can utilise the day more. I know for me, an earlier start means I can get more out of the day rather than me perhaps starting at 10 p.m. Also, the time before that, so students, if they were getting up earlier and then going to do something perhaps before school, would that not encourage people to maybe not turn up for their first lesson or be late to school, because there is no real structure in having an earlier start time?
Okay. Next speaker is Mr. Evan Campbell.
I'd like to back up Delassel's point. I think that I agree that the things we learn in school aren't very useful. And like you said, whilst the skills we learn and thirst for education is important, that can be there while still learning more important things. You mentioned hydrocarbon and more environmental stuff, excuse me. And yes, we should be learning about that. But I haven't really come into real contact with those issues until year 12 and 13, when I started studying environmental systems and societies. And that subject's only offered on IB, and I think that should be a more widely integrated subject. Also, one of the only other subjects I find important, other than one of the only subjects I find important is philosophy to me. It helps me in my approach to learning and more analytical and understanding skills. I think this should be something which is employed earlier on in the school system. Where was I going with that? So yeah, things like English literature and things like that. Although it is useful skills, it builds you as a learner. It's not useful. When am I ever going to sit down and deconstruct a book I'm reading? Like I just want to enjoy it, to be honest. So following on from that, in terms of teachers, I think a big way to challenge student stress would be more extracurricular activity. Not necessarily just sport, because that's going to be more stressful for some people than others. But I think we need more teaching staff to make this available. My mum is a teacher, and she works really, really long hours. She's always very stressed, and she's always trying to go above and beyond for her students, more extracurricular stuff, she's always got time to help students de-stress. And I think that the time that takes needs to be almost written into the school day for teachers, and there's not enough teachers in the system to account for that. And that is my point. Yeah.
Miss Emma Palmer.
So firstly, with times and stuff, just a general question, what time were you planning on introducing the school day to start? Because recent studies which have been suggesting that it should be at 10 a.m. If this gets put into place, then people won't finish school until 5 o'clock. I live in St. Wands, I won't get home till 6. By that point, I won't have much time to do anything with the rest of my day, and my whole life will be just going to school, waking up, and then coming home when it's dark and miserable. Your comment about sleep and stress, when you go to work, you have to wake up at that time to then go to your workplace, and stress is common in the work environment. Obviously, there is too much stress put on students nowadays, and I completely agree with that, with exams and all of this. But I feel like you can't get rid of all of the stress, because it's actually can be used as a positive factor, which is a useful skill to learn when you're in education, so that when you go into work, especially if you're going to be in a place like this, stress is very common. To do with the thing that you said about how a lot of stuff that you learn in school being irrelevant, yes, there is a lot of stuff for each individual person that they learn in school that they'll never use again. All of the equations I learned in maths, I'm never going to use again. But I think that there is a lot within life that you don't want to be turned into a machine throughout your whole time at school, being driven straight towards one career. You need to be enriched by education, otherwise we're all going to be so bland, we're going to be so boring. And there is a lot of things where you have to learn a bunch of subjects at the beginning, because otherwise you would be told from the age of 12, you'd have to decide what career path you wanted to go down. You'd have to decide all of these things, and there's a lot of things that I've personally picked up from subjects that I wouldn't have chosen to do, but that were made compulsory for me. For example, within RS, I've learned loads of things to do with Islam, and now I've been able to understand a lot of the things to do with our culture and Islamophobia today, and that's really helped me. Within history, you can see the repeating cycles of where our society is going today and how that has happened in the past and ways to avoid such issues. And a final thing, you mentioned that something to do with Islamic radicalization and schools encouraging. I don't really know what your point was there about how we encourage Islamic radicalization.
Miss Lily Dobber.
I have a few points that I'd like to make. So in response to someone's point over there, starting school later actually, in one study, improved enrollment and attendance and made students more likely to be on time when school started, as well as improving moods and reducing visits to the nurse or school counsellor. That was one study. Furthermore, you said that you didn't learn about eco-type things until doing it at the IB, which I'd like to point out is a very broad thing in the first place. So you're saying about not wanting to be learning all these things that you find irrelevant, but you're only going to... I feel like it's very important to have a broad education, as Emma said, and I think that's important. But we learnt, certainly in chemistry and biology at GCSE, we learnt a lot about ecosystems and things like that, so that gave us a good start there. So I disagree with the fact that it only starts at IB or A level. Furthermore, to second Emma's point, knowing some subjects is never going to be valuable to everyone, but you can't decide people should stop learning about analysing literature just because you don't like it. Like that, I just think that's quite a narrow-minded perception to take. And furthermore, it's all very good knowing about taxes, like you said. I think that's really important. I think we need more life skills and things like that, maybe brought into things like the PSHE curriculum. But what if you're like, if you don't learn about the organelles and chromosomes in science, then you're not going to be able to get a job in science if that's your goal. So you're not going to have a job. So there's no need to learn how to do taxes. Like, it all feeds into each other. That is what education is for.
Mr. Finn Mason.
My point's actually already been said.
Thank you. Mr. Owen Spillane.
So with the issue of sleep, I feel most of it is up to the individual. I get to school at 7 a.m. every single morning and still manage to have a 9-hour sleep. And I feel it's up to the individual student as opposed to the school to have that passion and to have that responsibility to actually get what they need. With regard to starting the school day later, it could present a lot of issues for parents, especially with maybe some of the younger years in the secondary school, where working parents would not be able to get their children to school for 10 a.m. You know, working parents are in the office from 9 till 5 or whatever job they do, and it's a major issue. And with regard to you deem some things irrelevant, everything's important to someone. You know, even if you don't find something important in the class, balance the probability that at least one of them does. And the education system is designed to be as broad as possible and to appeal to as many. So by narrowing this, we'd be kind of restricting the information and potentially a passion that people didn't realize they had for something if they don't end up learning about it in class. So that's my point.
Miss Jennifer Lewis.
You mentioned trying to then change the 8:30 starting time to, say, for example, 10 o'clock. But how can you be so sure that then the 10 a.m. will not then become the 8:30? Then you're just going to keep going, and it's just going to completely change people's sleeping pattern.
Mr. Patrick Lulker.
So firstly, I just want to disagree with my point, with my colleague behind me. I think it definitely shouldn't be left to each individual, as if the school just decided, oh, you can come in at whatever time you want, it will just be, it will be too specific, and it will never reach a point where everybody will get lessons when they want to and specify to each individual. So I think we need to go on the basis of studies that have been done where working earlier does improve the ability to learn, and also supporting a point from De La Salle to reform the school system. I think talking about learning a broad range of subjects, when said some of GCG, when you learn 3 A levels, compared to something like the IB that we do at Hurlia, where we do 6 subjects with such a range from social studies, language, English literature, maths, science, or something an arts based, which you have to take, and this just prepares you so much more for life, being so much more open-minded in that you don't have to specify yourself to a certain career, which, as you said, you can't decide where you want to be at 12, so how can you be sure you know what you want to do when you're 16, for example? And even if you are, for example, I knew I wanted to do medicine, but I still decided to take the IB and take that broad range of subjects, knowing it will be harder, knowing it'll take more work and time. However, I think the long-term investment for this is that you'll become such better citizens through things such we do this thing called CAS, Creativity Action Service, where we take 3 hours per week helping the community, doing projects to help the environment, but things such as Wellbeing Week we do at HODA to promote things on island for our students to improve mental well-being. And it's just such a way that it allows you to then go into the wider world and start these projects for people in your own local community. And IB being something that people do all across the world, such as we went to a trip to Costa Rica, who take the same take the same curriculum. Them are taking CAS and doing something small there, and us doing something small here. It all adds up in the long term, and it just benefits the whole in the long term. And I just feel that reforming this system in Jersey to make people do the IB, especially something in the middle years program and primary, which isn't addressed at the moment in Jersey, isn't available, should be reinforced.
Mr. Thomas Glover.
So in defence of the proposition, I would agree in one aspect of its overhauling of the testing system, which I think has a bias to a quantitative measure of someone's skill in any which subject, which is not always applicable, such as in, say, the philosophy and arts. Also, the lack of sleep, which has been mentioned, of course, does have defence in biology, as the sleeping patterns of students do not match up with their circadian rhythms, which are the natural order to which we organise our day-to-night cycle. However, I feel the proposition exaggerated this the lack of sleep in cause of stress, since there's been such a dramatic increase within the last generation, which I don't think can be entirely attributed to stress itself. Also, the study cited of Minnesota of reducing car crashes may only be a correlative effect. Also, the advocation for only practical knowledge, I think, disregards the use of having a general knowledge, since it implies that knowledge is only useful insofar as it is practical, whereas knowledge for knowledge's sake, I think, is the essence of the education system. Also, I'd wish you to specify the actual changes you'd wish to make, since you propose making changes, but have not articulated what those changes would be.
Mr. Jacob Bergen.
Okay, I'll finally respond to a few things now, I suppose. For me, personally, everyone's different for different amounts of sleep they need. I feel insanely tired basically every day of the school week. Like, I occasionally rest when I get home immediately because I'm just tired. But there's so many distractions. I think for the vast majority of people in education, maybe, university is different, A-levels are slightly different, but certainly for GCSE and mandatory education, you can't leave kids to control when they go to sleep. You could say you leave it up to parents, but there's so much technology nowadays, and it's so easy to get distracted. 12, or 1 in the morning feels a lot later, a lot like, I should get to sleep at this time maybe, than say 10, which is when you would be required to go to sleep if you have to get to school then, to get a good, proper night's sleep that is healthy. In regards to knowledge not being, you should learn a wide variety. Specialists are required in our society. Everywhere needs to specialize now. And people do need to know what they enjoy, but our point is more that necessary knowledge isn't taught necessarily. Like, I have no idea about tax. Maybe this is more of a personal thing, but I have not cooked anything ever. I can't cook in the slightest. And it would be useful to learn that in school. And of course, you know, parents should teach you that. And my dad has said for a while now he will at some point. Yeah. There was some other point as well, but a lot has been said. I can't fully remember it, so...
Oh, well, thank you, because you're not actually meant to repeat what other people have said. It's only if you want to make a new point, but that's fine. I want to encourage you anyway. Right, Miss Heather Orpin.
Similar to a point someone earlier made, how do you propose about orchestrating the bus times? Is the system going to be implemented in all schools so that all schools finish at the same time? Because are there enough buses to go around all the schools picking up everyone at the same time? I think the system at the moment is that certain schools finish earlier and the buses go to them first before the other schools. What do you propose to do about that?
Miss Rhiannon Murphy?
I'd just like to refer back to one of your original points. You suggested that many topics in the science area are labelled as non-applicable. However, they can actually be very applicable to many people across the island who plan on going into such STEM careers, which is actually critically lacking in diversity. For example, there's not enough women in STEM careers, there's not enough people of ethnic minorities in STEM careers at the moment. So do you think this should become optional, or should it be completely abolished, these science topics, which would actually hinder individuals from being able to reach the next stage of their further education?
Miss Dawn Rothwell.
You mentioned in your report and definitely in your speech not having enough relevance to the workplace, but actually for a lot of students studying A-level and IB, they would then go into university anyway because they would need further qualifications to go into their career. And for the courses which one would actually go straight into the workplace, which are mainly offered at Highlands, there is a heavy weighting on work experience within that course. So, I mean, for very little payout, because, for example, for a career like medicine, you can't have the level of work experience that you would need without the level of education which you would get from A-levels and IB.
Miss Rosie Nichols.
I was going to draw on earlier points by saying I think we're all perfectly capable, even as, you know, during GCSEs as a 15-year-old, of choosing when we go to bed. I think, you know, part of starting school at a specific time is that we should, you know, we have the independence to get ourselves to school. And therefore, I think by starting the school day later, you know, people could be encouraged, I know I probably would be, to go to bed later. So I think, you know, that defeats the whole point of starting the day earlier. I think we're all young adults. We should be able to make the responsible decision to go to bed a bit earlier if we know that we might be tired the next day. Thank you.
I've got Mr. Ewan Campbell, but I think you've already spoken, haven't you? So Miss Amy Hugh.
Relating back to the points you made earlier about the high level of mental health issues within schools being linked to exams, how else would you propose to examine students while reducing the stress levels at the same time?
Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, I'd like to call on Mr. James Dunn to respond.
In essence, our proposal is for general and large-scale reforms rather than specific issues like bus timings, which we feel don't really have many implications on the school day itself, although we do understand the importance of getting to school in the first place.
Okay, do you call for the appel, Mr. Dunn?
Yeah.
Okay, the appel has been called for. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have now had the opportunity to cast their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting, and I can announce that the proposition has been lost. There were 11 votes for, 13 against, with 4 abstentions. That moves us on to the next proposition, which has been brought by Lily Dobber of Jersey College for Girls, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The Assembly has asked whether it is of opinion that diversity quotas should be introduced to ensure that the States Assembly fairly represents the population of Jersey.
Ms Dobber.
We believe that diversity quotas should be introduced to ensure the States Assembly fairly represents the population of Jersey. To take the definition of diversity quotas from the CIPD, they are a type of affirmative action policy that aim to improve equality of opportunity and increase diversity by addressing the underrepresentation of minority groups in a range of different domains, including politics. Before we explain the benefits of quotas themselves, it is necessary to appreciate the reason that diversity, equal opportunities, and representation are important in the first place. There are obvious positives, such as having a larger range of life experiences and backgrounds to draw on, which can lead to access to a whole new range of people who may have felt alienated by a previously homogenous group of leaders, but who now feel seen and represented, and thus is more willing to discuss problems and change. For instance, research shows that when at least one team member shares a client's ethnicity, that team is 152% more likely to understand that client than another team. And in this case, a client could be an issue or a proposal that will impact a certain group. If you're still not convinced, then according to the United Nations, a minimum of at least 30% female legislators is required to ensure that public policy reflects the needs of women. However, an interesting and less discussed benefit of diversity is that being surrounded by people who are different than us challenges us to consider our words and decisions far more than being around people who are exactly like us. This forced awkwardness, researchers say, can lead to improved problem solving as disagreements encourage creativity that inspire more people to come up with solutions that work for everybody, as they have never been part of the, as well as forcing people to have discussions about problems they have never realized existed because they have never been part of the community that faces them daily. This is crucial in government, as we at least believe that one of its core aims should be to improve life for all the citizens they govern. A Harvard Business Review study also showed that without diverse leadership, perhaps without a diverse group of ministers in terms of Jersey's government, women are 20% less likely than white men to win endorsement for their ideas, and people of colour are 24% less likely. So, having outlined the many benefits of a diverse and representative team in government, why then is the States Assembly not already making a strong push to be more inclusive in its composition, and why do quotas not already exist? The answer is, of course, complex, but also betrays some uncomfortable truths that we rarely like to bring to the forefront. For instance, studies have shown that people are more concerned with the impact of a quota on members of their own group, that being, for instance, male or white, than they are by the improvement of circumstances in a target group. What is interesting is that to me it is clear that in terms of diversity in government, this apprehension towards changing the status quo really stems from the inherent biases and assumptions that people have about young people, women, people with disabilities, people of colour, and their abilities to actually succeed at politics, which is inherently linked to the age-old concern that these jobs won't go to the best candidate. How people come to the conclusion that they are employing the best candidates already from a tiny pool of less than half the population, if we consider it to be older white males, which is the majority of the State Assembly, is absurd to me, as it is laughable to suggest that we live in a society that is anything approaching a true meritocracy, because the status quo means that in the most recent election, we had 7 members re-elected unopposed and 7 members elected unopposed. To truly have a competent and representative government, we, voters and government members, must work hard to tackle internalized biases, and we believe, introduce diversity quotas to encourage the broadening of our horizon so the same few candidates don't get through every time. Of course, I'm sure you're all excited to point out the fact that not enough of these various demographics of people even run for government in the first place, so how on earth can we propose quotas for candidates who do not exist? This is a valid question with a clear answer. It is not merely enough to impose quotas and to expect people to step up to the plate. We must encourage people to see politics as a viable career path for them from the start, as well as rooting out the undeniable barriers that stop many people who would make fantastic politicians from taking that step. For instance, women are raised to be less competitive, less confident, and more risk-averse than men. These frustrating stereotypes can be challenged from within homes and schools. Another example is that if a woman is married to a man, she feels she has a higher status position compared to her husband's, she's more likely to feel resentful or embarrassed. However, this sentiment is reduced in the study that this was done in when the husbands provided physical support to their wives in terms of helping with care or doing household chores. Our point being that there are very real changes that can be made that will have a large impact, and the main goal of raising this issue and of implementing diversity quotas would not simply be to get a predefined number of various demographics into the state and leave it at that, but to really tackle the problems that have led to this appallingly homogenous state of affairs in the first place. Overall, by introducing diversity quotas, the government and the people will benefit enormously from new, more innovative ideas, people who understand each other and their issues better, and a more successful government.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, the proposition is seconded. Not only do diversity quotas provide emotional benefits, they also present practical benefits in business and government. Gender quotas in business result in more gender diversity within companies, which leads to enhanced firm innovation, in turn leading to increased accountancy-based performance. In addition, a McKinsey & Company study found that an increase in women's overall share of labour in the United States, increasing from 37% to 47% over the past 40 years, is responsible for a quarter of the country's current GDP. Other forms of diversity, such as ethnic diversity, are equally as important and beneficial. An economic value of cultural diversity study concluded that their findings were consistent with the dominant positive effect of diversity on productivity. A more multicultural urban environment makes US-born citizens more productive. And the Center for Talent Innovation found that 48% of companies in the US with more diversity at senior management improved their market share the previous year, while only 33% of companies with less diverse management reported similar growth. Diversity quotas are not only employed in business around the world, but also in government. For example, in Singapore, racial quotas have been introduced in public housing as an attempt to fairly allocate opportunities between its majority Chinese population and minority Malay, Muslim, and Indian ethnic groups. Furthermore, these quotas in government also see benefits. A Journal of Politics study found that in countries where gender quotas were introduced, the female representation doubled, and as a result, these governments tended to shift their priorities, for example, away from military spending and towards public health. However, for diversity quotas to be effective, they have to be more than a mere token. They must be mandatory and sufficient enough that they mirror the population if diversity is to truly be introduced and significant benefits are to be gained. This means they cannot simply be a guideline and that repercussions must result if they are not reached, such as in Norway, where companies face dissolution if they fall short of their gender quotas. To introduce diversity quotas in Jersey, we will need to consider the population and the sizes of the different diversity groups within it. If we take gender diversity as an example, in Jersey, the State's Assembly should contain 27 women to accurately represent the population, which women make up 51%. Currently, there are only 14 elected female members in the State's Assembly, meaning women make up only 29% of elected members. This shameful figure highlights the reason why diversity quotas need to be introduced if diversity and proper representation of the population is to be achieved. However, as the number is currently so low, these quotas would have to be introduced gradually rather than instantly. For example, in the next election, the quota could be set at 40% of women, as is popular with many businesses that introduce gender diversity quotas, and then increased over time to accurately represent the population. As the population and the groups within it are constantly changing, quotas must be adjusted with each election to ensure they represent this, and warnings must be given on the latest quotas to voters and candidates as the elections approach. By introducing diversity quotas into the states, the government would be able to lead by example and encourage other sectors to follow suit, creating a more diverse government and workforce so that Jersey can reap the benefits. For example, last week the JEP published an article reporting on how Jersey's economy could be boosted by £239 million if more women were encouraged to work, which could directly result from diversity quotas in business, encouraged by diversity quotas in government. In conclusion, we propose that diversity quotas should be introduced into the States Assembly to ensure that it fairly represents the population of Jersey. We propose this as we believe it will enable minority groups' voices to be heard and for them to be better represented, so that in future, quotas can be removed, as minority groups will not feel held back by prejudices and thus will be more likely to put themselves forwards for elections and jobs. This will mean voters and employers really will be able to find the best people for the job and will be able to benefit from all the positive effects of having a diverse team.
Are there any members which wish to speak? Ms. Rhiannon Murphy.
Just going back to your original proposition, would you not consider that it's more important to contain the States Assembly with individuals who are best qualified to do so? Surely we should be encouraging, instead of putting people of diversity in simply because they're of a different race or a different gender, isn't necessarily the best thing to do. And surely we should be encouraging the education of the ethnic minorities and women to have the skills that are required to gain these positions, rather than just including underqualified individuals with larger diversity simply because of the pressure to have a diverse assembly.
Ms. Rhiannon Murphy? Oh no, sorry. I'm going down my list here. Ms. Jennifer Cullen.
You mentioned how clients, I think it was by 130%, are more comfortable with communication and talking to someone who are of the same ethnic group as them. Is that not counterintuitive? Does that not encourage that ethnic group to discriminate against people that are not of the same group as them? But in general, I do agree with your proposition, but I would say, rather than quotas, does it not need to happen before? Does it, the women and the people in ethnic minorities, do they not need to be provided with the opportunities and examples for them to build their CV and get involved in building up the confidence and the skill set to then go for higher jobs or go for different jobs within the economy or the market? Is it better to equip people for these opportunities rather than forcing diversity quotas where they may be ill-fitting?
Mr. Sean Hughes.
I remember you bringing up the point about women being less competitive. What do you plan to do to fix this or change this? Sorry.
Ms. Clara Gowru.
So we kind of knew this argument was going to come up, that we wouldn't get the best people for the job, and that we need to, if we were to introduce this policy, it would need to come hand in hand with other policies. This couldn't be standalone. We fully understand that. We need to educate people on how to be more confident, introducing kind of the idea, perhaps in the PSHE curriculum, of politics as a career for women. And education doesn't just mean in the classroom sitting down and learning about things. It means being taught things every day, you know, that educational attainment and kind of thirst for education that comes from that. People will experience that later in lives. And there are kind of groups in Jersey that aim to do this. Lean In Women, for example, is one where women in senior positions help other women get in senior positions by teaching them how to be more confident and how to kind of speak properly. For example, at JCG, we have lots of initiatives to combat this. We have something called the Speak Out competition, where we have to stand up and talk about something that is meaningful to us in front of kind of an assembly or the year. Yeah, we kind of just hope that quotas would encourage people to come forward. And if they think, you know, like one of our teachers, Deputy Persha, she used to teach us English, and she thought, actually, maybe this is something I can do. And we hope that quotas would kind of encourage more people to think that it is a career that they could possibly partake in.
Ivan Campbell.
I'd like to agree with the proposition. I think diversity is very important. I think it was a well-argued point. I think quotas is the issue here. And I think that is something that should be employed quite quickly. Talking about needing to establish education for these other groups and stuff, especially females. I think that's already there, to be honest. I think the boys have been smacked around a bit in this debate so far by women. And So I think if we were to establish a quota sooner rather than later to get more women into Parliament, whatever you want to call it, that would be important. But going forward, a quota might not be the best way to do it, because once you've already established a more diverse people in government, and the mindset starts to change, I think that's the important thing, the mindset, rather than sort of the technicalities of it and ensuring that you have to have this many people. So I think there would need to be more flexibility in that quota than, say, just a 50-50 split or whatever minorities we're talking about, to allow, flexibility to people having a broader range of skills independent of their ethnic group or whatever. And it might be almost against this diversity idea to say, right, you have to, this minority group has to fill up this percentage, this minority group has to fill up this percentage. I think it's more about being open-minded, and once that mindset has changed, then I don't think the quota is necessary. I think until then it is a good idea.
Miss Emma Powell.
To your thing about how you need to not have specific amount of numbers and everything in this example in the States Chamber, the whole idea of the quotas is that when they're first introduced, they're made mandatory so that people who are from those ethnic minorities or women feel like they do have a place in a job like this, and that then they are encouraged to pursue this as a career path, and eventually these quotas, they won't be needed because people will step up. And you can already see that with the argument where women or people from ethnic minorities, by introducing these quotas, you might get people who are underexperienced and they aren't the best candidate. And Patrick, I think you mentioned this earlier on you had a very valid argument with your Australian point system about how you can't just, you need people to come in who are skilled. You couldn't get someone in here who wasn't skilled. And the argument back is that there are people from ethnic minorities who are skilled, and there are people who can represent the views of their minority that we don't understand because we aren't part of that minority. With the thing about males and females, if you look at the amount of people who are here right now, there's actually more women in here than men, which shows that there is a vast group of females who do want to pursue this career, who do want to get into politics, and who are perfectly able to do it. If you want the exact percentage, it's 53.6% of the people here are girls, to the nearest decimal place. Basically, the whole thing that you asked about how you're going to stop people, women from feeling like they can't be competitive, that is a social construct where women are criticised for being outgoing and all of this stuff you hear every day, women are dishwashers, women go make me a sandwich. It's these small things which does get into girls' heads, and people are then internalizing the fact that they need to stay quiet, and it is something that's wrong in society and something that needs to change. And through introducing diversity quotas into the States and showing young girls that there are influential people, and maybe that we won't only have the second female prime minister right now, in the UK. Once changes like this start to happen, then women will grow in confidence and they will realise that society accepts them and their abilities just as much as men.
Mr. Jacob Bergen.
So do you not think perhaps quotas could potentially have the opposite effect of they're only there because they have to be there, they are not deserving of their place, and there are only 27 women in our states because they have to be there? I don't know, you obviously can say it openly politically or whatever, but I don't know, rumours can do a lot in demeaning stuff. But yeah, just they got in easy, they were token, they don't deserve to be here really, but they are because we have to have them. And it's not their own capabilities. Because we can all think of the obvious counter-argument of capable people are losing out, and that changes to this.
Miss Amy Hume.
How can you realistically say that you are creating equal opportunities for everyone, as you said in your opening statement, when you are essentially moving the discrimination to another group of people who haven't been born with the characteristics you are now favouring? I would say that a selection process based on meritocracy is actually the process that would create a fair society, rather than valuing inherent characteristics that people don't have control over.
Mr. Thomas Glover.
I disagree with the proposition. Firstly, for the fact that it seems it would create a superficial sense of change in the states, in that the culture hasn't actually changed in order to have an equal representation, as in what people have voted for, but instead it's been implemented there. And so, so instead of it being a bottom-up approach to creating equalities, it's instead imposed. Also, with this being applied to the states, I think this would undermine democracy, since you would have to have a certain amount of either female or male, despite other more favourable candidates. Therefore, again, not just undermining democracy, but additionally meritocracy. So the way in which I'd propose this change in order to come about, since I agree with the intent of it, would be one in which it is through other avenues that we can change the culture at large, and thereby bring about that change democratically, with having an equal distribution of male to female members. And you could do that through, say, education. Of course, this would have to be done through the assets of direct democracy, as we have seen demonstrated today with the teachers' strike. Also, concerning minorities, you propose that the main reason to which candidates of those minorities do not run was due to an apathy, which I'd agree with, though you didn't seem to justify how you would reduce that apathy. Also, of course, this is not just applicable. These diversity quotas aren't just applicable to the states, but also to business. And yes, again, I'd think that there's not undeniably a bias in business towards one sex over the other. Again, quotas would perhaps backfire by having that change imposed instead of being brought about through the culture itself.
Ms. Storm Rothwell.
You argued that someone argued that it was undemocratic, but in fact, having politicians elected in unopposed is far more democratic, especially when they're mainly middle-aged white men who aren't representative of the population anyway. And in fact, even if someone is, for example, less qualified, having less working experience in the field of politics, that doesn't allow for context-specific information. For example, while someone may have more experience being a politician, that can be because in the past biases towards them have let them be elected in. And the best candidate is, in fact, someone who is representative of the minorities who already aren't represented in government. We simply cannot understand the issues faced by minorities, which we aren't. And by introducing quotas, the change in attitudes will actually increase democracy, because more people are going to be standing, so there'll be more choice for the voters.
Mr. Patrick Lalka.
So firstly, I would like to, because you've heavily mentioned on women, in your surveys here, there's a lot of, the majority of the women that are in parliament seats are from, are seen as less economically developed countries, so such as Costa Rica, for example, and Rwanda. So I was just wondering if you could tell me, what are they doing better? How are they? So in Jersey can be said it's a more economically developed country. We are doing well. We are a very healthy, wealthy island, and we are doing well. But there is more men in the parliament than there is Rwanda. However, Rwanda and say Costa Rica isn't seen to be doing as well. So it kind of shows the opposite effect to what you were suggesting. Also, in your the surveys, it says under Mexico, it says it's only an estimate. So it kind of shows the unreliable nature of the data and how Mexico's system is seen to be so unreliable that they can only give an estimate of how many women are there. I would also like to mention that as Jersey is normally seen as a very wealthy island, there is a very grand misconception that we have a dual economy where there is a very high percentage of people who are very poor and a percentage who are very wealthy. So with your heavy focus on women, I was wondering how would you encourage people who are smart coming from Poland or Portugal who are maybe don't speak the language and don't have the economic advantages of people living here to run for elections and have their voice heard when they're only able to come here and only start to settle in. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. James Dunn.
At the core of issues to do with equality and equality ethics is the idea that there should be equal treatment for equals and unequal treatment for unequals. So, for example, people who are equal should be treated equally. So in the example of quotas, people who are equal, you're deeming to be equal, so women and minorities which are equal as the same middle-aged white men which take these seats, they are being treated unequally compared to the equals.
Does any other member wish to speak? Okay, I'll call on Miss Lily Dobber to reply.
Okay, so something that I would really like to emphasise is that we want to use these quotas to inspire a change because, as many of you said, a really valid and valuable point is that people need to be encouraged from education, from lower levels of education, primary school to secondary school, that they feel that they have the skills and the competences to be able to go into politics. And we feel that having diversity quotas would raise the profile of this issue, the issue being not enough minorities in Parliament, and therefore get people thinking about it and also hopefully inspired to become Parliament members or states members. And but obviously this cannot be done without a culture change. However, you did mention a culture change. I mean, society has had a long time to change culture. Culture and the culture of stereotypes and sexism and racism and things are changing, things are always changing, but sometimes I think that we need this affirmative action to really push us into the next stage of development. And quotas can combat the internal biases that people have. You said that equals should be treated as equals, and yes, of course, but internal biases that people have because of these years of built up stereotypes and things like that, and society that people are just brought up and they can't necessarily change, that causes the internal biases, which then you could I will argue, causes people to be treated unequally. And so quotas can be one method of combating these internalized biases until, as we mentioned, we would try and remove the quotas when that mindset seems to be thoroughly established and changed within the states. Furthermore, someone spoke about how to ensure that this would, to ensure the diversity would really happen, because otherwise, what if you don't have enough candidates? What if it ends up having to be more men? In that case, we would suggest that quotas are only actually effective, according to studies, when they have been when there are sanctions against them not occurring. So we would suggest a sanction such as reducing state members' salaries or something like that. But that would have to be brought up for discussion because, that would, we think, make quotas more effective. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is the appel called for?
Yeah, call for the appel.
Thank you. So the appel has been called for. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have now cast their votes, I would ask the greffier to close the voting, and I can announce that the debate has been won. 16 votes for, 9 against, and 4 abstentions. The next item on the agenda was going to be a proposition brought forward from a Victoria College student. So unfortunately, they aren't here this afternoon. So we'll move on to the next item, which is a proposition being brought by Rhiannon Murphy of Bowlia. And I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The Assembly has asked whether it is of opinion that civil service job applications should be anonymised until candidates are selected for interview.
Our proposal is that any job application for a position in the civil servants should be completely anonymised until candidates are selected for interview. We think that in a world where equality is becoming increasingly significant, these crucial positions in society should be free from prejudice. We suggest that applications should not require applicants to provide any information regarding race, age, gender, and name. Hopefully, this would remove preconceived ideas based on these uncontrollable and unchangeable factors. This proposal is about equality and giving equal opportunities to individuals of any age, gender, and ethnicity. It is with the intention that this would increase meritocracy in the job application process, as anonymising applications would allow people to be selected for the next stage of application based on the skills that they would have to benefit the company employing them, as opposed to being selected simply because they have connections within the industry or may appear to have features which the employer may like. We have found that during the first online application process for the states of Jersey, it's almost immediately asked for the applicant's cultural and ethnic origin, long-term mental or physical disability, and age. This indicates that the information will play a role in the candidate being selected for the next stage of their application, something which could decrease diversity and increase discrimination in the workplace. We appreciate that the mental state of the applicant would be important should they be offered the position. However, we feel that it would be inappropriate to make the decision regarding if this was an issue or not at the very first stage of application. In our opinion, this decision should be made later on in the interview process, where the individual's mental state can be discussed at length with the employer, who can then decide if it will affect the applicant's ability to fulfill the role. Anonymising applications for positions in the civil service would overall increase the competency of the workforce, as applicants would be selected based on skills they possess without discrimination against innate characteristics. This would lead to individuals with much more valuable and applicable skills and qualities to be employed by companies, as opposed to simply being employed due to them being a certain age or race by an employer who may want their company to seem particularly diverse. This point could lead to arguments that it would be tougher to create a genuinely diverse workplace. However, we believe the focus should then be on educating minorities and giving them further desirable skills that will make them more employable. A study conducted by the National Bureau of Economic Research measures discrimination in a novel way. In response to job advertisements in Chicago and Boston newspapers, they sent mock resumes with either typical African American or Caucasian names and measured the number of callbacks each resume received for interviews. In total, they applied for 1,300 employment advertisements in sales, administrative, and customer service job categories. The results indicated large racial differences in callback rates, as job applications with typical Caucasian names needed to send about 10 resumes out to receive a callback, whereas an application with a typical African American name needed to send approximately 15 resumes. This would suggest either employer prejudice or employer perceptions that race signals lower productivity. This study is clear evidence of the issues that face individuals of different ethnicities in regards to job applications, and displays why changes desperately need to be made to this current application process, as it leaves significant room for prejudice and discrimination against our workforce.
Thank you, Ms Murphy. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, it is seconded.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Mr Patrick Lelka.
So you said that all the nationality, age and the name should be anonymized. However, I believe certain jobs, such as definitely language teachers, if you know that someone is from, for example, Spain, and they're applying for a job as a Spanish teacher, I think it is not racist to say that if someone from England who knows how to speak Spanish and a native and Spanish speaker who could speak English should be chosen over the person born in England, as it would allow for such better experience for the students, definitely, as things like sayings or traditions could be influenced into the students. And I think it should be definitely said that being able to communicate these skills to the students and influence their culture onto them is definitely a skill and something that people should be proud of and shouldn't be anonymized. And this really shows the misallocation of resources of human capital, where people such as immigrants are such valuable, as has been said here before, of bringing economic, cultural benefits into the island, for example. And anonymizing these would only put people in a random order, and if the Spanish native speakers put last on the list, then tough luck, you have to try in another school, for example, and it wouldn't benefit the society.
Thank you. Ms Emma Palmer.
So the idea of anonymous civil service applications, I think that to an extent that is like a good idea and it is a way to battle discrimination. But how would you prevent the discrimination from just being postponed to a later stage, as in when you get to interviews, and then obviously like affinity bias, and obviously then like the person can't stay anonymous forever through the whole application progress. Also, there was one thing that they found in France where when they tried using the anonymous applications, is that places that tried to increase diversity by trying to recruit people who were of different ethnic backgrounds and more women, callback rates actually went down because they've been trying hard to increase their diversity because of context-specific information. Like, if you are a white and middle-class person, you will receive a better education from where you come from. Like, for example, all of us here will receive a better education than someone who maybe, like, I have a friend whose mum lived in Madeira and she stopped going to school at the end of primary school and joined like a farm. Like, there is context-specific information, obviously, like, maybe not in that specific case because that person wouldn't really be applying for the civil service, but like where you need to like low-income backgrounds do have worse opportunities sometimes, but they could be just as capable to do the job than other people. For example, with age, you'd have less work experience if you didn't say that, like, if the employers didn't know that you were young and that you were just like out of university, then would they just see like having no work experience as a bad thing? Just like, how would you battle these things?
Ms Heather Orpin.
I'd like to agree with the proposition, as there are ways, such as when you apply for certain university courses with things like the MLAT and the BMAT, which are aptitude tests to certain subjects, that you can assess someone's aptitude for that subject, in this case for a job which relates to that subject, and is another way to test how they would fit for the job instead of just an interview.
Miss Jennifer Cullen.
I again do agree with the proposition. I just do think that there would be some issues going about it. So, for example, companies or businesses do need to do background checks or police checks to ensure that their candidate that they are going to invite to interview does not have a criminal record or has not been in trouble with the law. Similarly, very common nowadays, they like to do social media checks before inviting candidates to interview to ensure that they are not publicly discriminatory or radically racist, or I don't know. But yeah, so how are you going to prevent ensuring that you are not inviting people to interview without doing prior checks to ensure that they are right for the role?
Mr. Thomas Glover.
A previous speaker mentioned something called an affinity bias, which I presume is based upon, say, an interview with the applicant. And I think what underpins the sentiment of this proposition is partly the presumption that all bias is bad bias, whereas, say, an affinity bias, whereby where someone makes a good impression, or a bad one, is in some way uninformative to the process of the application, which I can't see as agreeable. It's only the biases to which inform a prejudice that would be a bad bias, such as in the cases in which the offer of opportunities may be limited due to the anonymity of the applicants, such as, say, when an offer may be given to someone of lesser experience, either due to their age or their economic background. Also in cases in which experience cannot be officially recognised. What I think is ought to be the resolution to this issue of bias in job applications is rather an oversight of the process of those of those offering the application.
Miss Jennifer Lewis.
I would like to raise a point that Patrick made about Spanish teachers. Well, if they studied Spanish to a point of being able to teach it, then surely they are capable and competent. And that would also introduce discrimination and place a person born in England at a disadvantage and possibly loss of employment simply because they are not of Spanish nationality. This would also decrease the amount of people able to apply to a second language job. So, for example, I was born in Jersey, but I speak Portuguese, so why should I not be able to apply for a Portuguese-speaking job?
Miss Lily Dobber.
I would just like to clarify that the term affinity bias used by Emma refers to a bias whereby you're more likely to, for instance, if you're an employer, pick a candidate who has traits similar to you, maybe same ethnicity, same background, same gender. And so in that case, it's still a bias and it's still, it can still be a negative thing because the whole point of anonymizing is to reduce biases entirely, and I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to go about trying to define what's a good bias and what's a bad bias, because I think if we remove all of the biases, then you're going to try and get see who's the best candidate for the job. Also, an interesting point is the fact that not only is that job listings themselves, the clients, the type of people that they attract can depend on the wording. For instance, there was a study done that showed that if certain words or terms were used, for instance, like a rock star, that's going to attract more male candidates than female candidates, or saying something like a passion for learning is going to attract more female candidates than male candidates. So it's, I think, something to be aware of is that this needs to be like broader than just anonymizing applications, but probably as well thinking about the wording on job listings in the first place.
Miss Rosie Nichols.
I agree with the intent of the proposition. I think it's really important that we try to give everyone equal opportunities in the workplace. However, I don't think anonymising applications is the best way to go. I don't think people should have to be ashamed of their nationality or where they come from or their age. I think it's something that should be celebrated, and something, I know that there is deep-rooted bias within society towards different nationalities, and I think that's possibly what the proposition is trying to address, but I think that could be better tackled through education of employers, just of society in general, that we should just be celebrating people wherever they come from. Everyone has different skills to bring, and I think that's not something that should be anonymised. That's not something that should be anonymised, and I think we need to place a greater importance on looking for candidates who are more diverse.
Miss Amy Hugh.
Just to respond to a few of the points made. Someone said that the prejudice could be postponed to the interview process, where we agree it could be, but hopefully it would decrease it in some way with an employer not just looking straight at an application and saying, I know this person because I know their last name and I'm going to put them straight through to the interview process. Someone mentioned about social media and employers liking to do checks on people. We said that this wasn't really relevant and that checks on people can actually discriminate against people, as we've all had social media since we were quite young now, and if you've made a mistake on there when you were, say, 12 years old and an employer looks back on that, I don't think that should really affect your job offer now for someone who's 17. Someone brought up that it could decrease diversity within the workplace, but I think that comes down to educating minorities and giving them skills that will make them more employable rather than just employing them because they're a minority. This will increase meritocracy within the workplace, hopefully, because candidates will be chosen based on their skills in their application.
Miss Christy Lyons.
Just referring to what Amy said, I'd just like to clarify that we considered the applications being postponed and being abused by the interview process. However, the practicality of a company going through like 100 interviews would cost them a mass amount of money, and I don't think that they'd want to waste all their time and money doing that when you can get the applications done in a few hours.
Does any other member wish to speak? Very well. I shall call on Miss Murphy to reply.
I'd just like to begin by addressing some of the points that were made by some other people. The first point I'd like to address was made, I think, over here about someone who speaks their native language being employed over someone who's learnt the language and may have been born in a different area. And I think this is a really unnecessary perspective, as someone born in England with a firm grasp of, for example, I think the example was Spanish, could actually have a firmer grasp of the language than someone that was born in Spain and may have spoke that language growing up but doesn't speak it as much anymore. So they might actually have less of a grasp of the language than the person who's learnt it later on in life, maybe at GCSE and A-levels. So I think that they would actually be more applicable to be put into a teaching job of a language. The next one I'd like to address is the affinity bias, where you said that employers might actually hire someone just because they feel they're similar to them. But this method would actually decrease the positive discrimination, which is rather than discounting any minority candidates, you could hire managers who discriminate positively and would actually prioritise these minority candidates and giving them more of a view and more of a second look at that possibly someone with an affinity bias might not have done. And in summary, equality is our major concern in regards to this matter. We want to be able to move forward and establish a workforce free of discrimination completely and prejudice in a world that's aiming to do just that. And anonymising civil service applications is just the first step of many towards a fairer society and future for us all.
Is the appel called for?
Yes.
Thank you. So the appel has been called for. I ask the greffier to open the voting. If all members have cast their votes, I ask the Greffier to close the voting. And I can announce it is a tied vote, 13 for, 13 against, and 2 abstained. So I think we've had a varied results throughout the afternoon. So well done. This brings us to the end of public business. But before we leave, I thought I'd just give you a little short resume of how today has gone. We've had 46 questions and supplementary questions asked, 10 questions to the Chief Minister and answered in 15 minutes. So I think he took heed about his telling off to keep his answers concise. So well done. We've had a total of 45 speakers over 4 debates. So I think we all ought to congratulate you. Very well done on the many contributions that you've made. I'd also just like to say thank you to the Gref, and especially the Deputy Greffier who's been liaising with your schools and school teachers and set up the assembly for today, so that there's an awful lot of work that goes on behind the scenes with changing everyone's names from the state's members to your own, so I could eventually work out what I'm doing up here with this little gadget. So I'd like to thank Lisa and the Greffier and all the Gref staff for helping put this together. All the papers that you have on your desk are for you to keep. And I think there's going to be a folder made up for you as a bit of a memento of your experience here. It's been an interesting youth assembly this year. It's been going for 22 years now. 2 of the current members of the states were youth assembly participants some years ago. One of them, Senator Sam Mesick, was in the Assembly today answering questions as a minister. So perhaps in due course all of you could return in one capacity or another. Certainly by the standard of debate and the questions asked, I think you had a very, very high standard. So I think the second vote of thanks should go to you, because there was obviously a lot of preparation that went on, and your contributions were elegant, incisive, and very, very thoughtful. I think it's really good that all of you here are interested in politics and debating. I was actually the politician that passed our laws, the first in Great Britain to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote. So Jersey was a first for one. So it's really good that you're interested and can play a part in our society, if not as a voter, maybe one day as a states member as well, and that would be really, really good. We've got some soft drinks downstairs, and I'd invite you to come down and sort of come down with your friends and any people you have in the public gallery who wish to join you. So thank you very much and well done.
We'd just like to thank the chair, Deputy Lavey, for doing a fantastic job running the event, especially as it was her first time since becoming the CPA chair. Thank you so much.
Yes, I don't know who was more nervous, you or me. But anyway, it's a learning curve for us all today. Thank you very much. Right, the States stands adjourned.